Coast Avengers. West Coast Avengers.
All right, welcome in everybody. It's another SunDAVE sit down, but this is a better SunDAVE sit down because you're not going to just be talking to me. No. I brought you a special guest, and that special guest is John Wayshak. Now, you may not know John Wayshak, but you're going to get to know John Wayshak. He's worked on comics for a long time. He's an illustrator. He's just a fucking artist, and he loves comics too. You might know his work from De-Evolution, a series that he did with Rick Remender. He's done covers for Philadelphia, Predator, Batman Max, and Scumbag, and not me. I'm a scumbag, but not that scumbag. Anyway, let's get John in here, and we're going to talk about comics. That's what we do here. Hey,
Hi.
what's up? What's up, brother?
Man? How are you?
I'm fantastic. I've had a whirlwind week, and I'm going to Portland tomorrow, and so you're my last thing that I have to do until I go away.
Cool. Are you still in Seattle, or are you somewhere else now?
I moved south to Tacoma, so like 25 miles south.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah, it's a little bit quieter. There's more comic stores, and I got a car for the first time since I moved out of Queens, which is really interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so like from New York to Seattle to Portland to Seattle to here, I had not owned a car.
I believe it. Seattle, you don't need to. I can't believe you. I didn't know you were from Queens, actually. So it's amazing you had a car out there.
Well, I grew up on Long Island, but then when I moved to the city, I got rid of my car. But you don't need it when you live in a city these days. Yeah. So we don't need to do the whole introduction thing. I know you. You know me. The people out here, they're going to get to know you intimately.
Okay. We'll see.
But
we'll see about that.
What do you let's just dive in. I got a question. I love asking this question. Do you remember the first, or within, let's say 5, do you remember the first or one of the first 5 comics you ever bought?
Well, okay, so like a given to me, or that I actually bought?
No, that you went out and bought.
I don't remember what the first actual bought. My earliest ones that I remember buying is I remember buying the Fantastic Four that Walt Simonson did with the time sled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I remember specifically buying that, and then I remember buying New Mutants number 100.
Oh yeah.
That was before I even knew who Liefeld was. I was just drawn by the cover, and I remember specifically getting Marvel Comics Presents number 91 with the Sam Keith storyline, the Blood Hungry one, because I remember seeing in Comic Shop News, the free newspaper thing, like they were talking about they showed the cover for like the first part of that series, but when I went to the comic store, they only had like, I don't know, whatever that was, like part 6 or part 7. Mm-hmm. So those are the early ones I remember specifically buying, like looking for and buying.
Yeah, Sam Keith. I mean, and we could talk about that. That's one of the things I wanted to ask you about. But he changed, to me, like as a comic buyer, he changed what comics could look like for a mainstream book. Like McFarlane and all those guys. But there's something about Sam Keith that just wasn't normal. It wasn't even abnormal. It was like another world. It felt like, like the way that he would do the torn Wolverine costume. And I mean, when he got to the Wolverine Venom storyline, I was like, oh, Venom can look like that.
Yeah. I mean, he was trying to do something different. He was trying to tell stories in only the way Sam can, you know what I mean? Where versus like a lot of the other guys who are like, they were in it for superheroes. Sam wasn't, and he never was. And I think that clearly kind of showed in his work,
Mm-hmm. So you worked with Sam on a web comic called Chicken Revolt, right?
Yeah.
And
when the chickens revolt.
What was that? How did that even come about?
With that, trying to remember. So Sam keeps like these sketchbooks. Like Sam has unbelievable amount of like unpublished work, and then he has like these sketchbooks he keeps just for himself.
Hmm.
And the idea was we were going to bounce back and forth, and it wasn't even a comic, it was more of an art project, and it was supposed to bounce back and forth, and we did that for a little while. The project stopped because I never had time to work on it, and it's as simple as that. Sam is actually finished. Sam's been like finished for like years now. Like the holdup's been me this whole time. So it's a project that I will finish. And what's interesting about it is it'll be different now because so much time has passed. It'll be different from how I originally intended to finish it. But it'll be finished someday. It's just I just never have time to work on it. But it'll be finished and published. Whether it takes 5 years or 20 years, it'll happen. It's just one of those things, and it's its own thing. So when it's ready to come out, it will.
Yeah.
You know?
Hey, look, not everything isn't done in the day, and good things, take time. Speaking of Sam Keith, I wanted to throw this up on the screen. Let's get us a little bit smaller because we're just a bunch of dudes. This is a piece of art here. Did you ever read his fill-in issue on the Hulk?
I have a copy of it. I never read it. I kind of just looked at the artwork. I was never like big into that Peter David run. I read some of the Dale Keown issues just because I like the art so much. But that's about as much as I know about that run, to be totally honest.
I put Peter David in kind of with. I don't have anything against Claremont or David. When I read their books, especially with amazing artists, you've got McFarlane on this run, and then you got Sam Keith and some Eric Larson. But like when you put Jim Lee in front of Chris Claremont, the art's it's just better than the writing. It's more interesting than the writing to me. But this is a small story. I really enjoy. I read it like a year ago for the first time. I didn't even know it existed. It's a small story, which you don't see too many small Hulk stories. But man, the way that he drew Hulk, kind of looking like he had like a hangover and a 5 o'clock shadow permanently. Hulk just looks like shit through this entire book, and I love that.
Yeah.
But I look at your artwork and I see a lot of Sam in there. I think that's why you guys gelled well together. It's kind of why when I read Alex's book that he did with Sam, it's just the two of you guys complement each other so well. Both you and Alex complimenting Sam's work. But
I think so. I think it's a cool book. I don't know why I just never got around to reading it, but so I can't comment on the story at all. But the artwork's really cool. I mean, the same thing for the McFarlane Hulks too. Like for me, like I really like how McFarlane just made it like this over exaggerated, just monster. You know what I mean? I always enjoyed that aspect of his Hulk. But in regards to what you said earlier, I actually like Claremont, and I don't. I actually prefer Silvestri's run over Jim's run in X-Men because it was more Jim's artwork. Jim is a fantastic artist, but like the Silvestri, I think Silvestri's artwork at that time worked better with Claremont stuff. So like I actually really liked it, both writing and artwork wise.
I've read a lot of it. I can't say I've read every Chris Claremont X-Men because that's 176 issues or something. But there's just there's so many words, and I feel like you can kind of skim, but you can't skim on the artwork. Like Silvestri's the classic one where Wolverine's nailed up to the X, which I only found out recently, and maybe you know this because I know you at least read some Conan. Savage Sword of Conan 5 is a Boris Vallejo cover, and that's where Silvestri homaged that cover from. It's got Conan up on an X.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
It's interesting. The more comics that I see on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, the more I start to kind of like put those two pieces together. Seeing an homage. But there was something you just said that. Well, I guess we could talk about Todd, but we've had enough conversations between the two of us about Todd.
I'm sure.
But what So this, and I read in that little thing you did with Matt. So was this your first Todd Amazing Spider-Man?
That was my first comic book.
That was
So
your
it
first
was,
comic book.
yeah. So because I didn't grow up a comic reader,
Mhm.
I got that when I was like maybe like 9 or 10 years old. My dad had no interest in comics even as a kid, so like it wasn't something that was in my world. And um, he had he had a client, a real estate client that like whose
Mhm.
son had comics. So like as a goof, he bought me a few comics for my birthday. So that's what that's about. And it was that, a Spectacular Spider-Man with Sal Buscema, and a Transformers comic. And what struck me about that was it was just shocking in that I didn't know that's what comics looked like, because I know like Saturday Morning Fare, which is basically the John Romita stuff, and then the Garcia Lopez like DC stuff, and like
Mhm.
I just didn't know comics looked like that. So it was like shocking, and it's what made me decide I want to be an artist. Like it happened like that quickly,
That's
because it
so
was just such
cool.
a shocking thing. And then the next, I mean, and the next big shock was Sam. When I saw that Wolverine cover, it's just I'm always drawn towards things that are different and kind
Mhm.
of break the mold, and that book is definitely it. You know what I mean? It's getting close to like some of the stuff Todd was doing like a few issues later was just like it was like he was improving on leaps and bounds at this time. You know what I mean? Like a few even a few issues later, you're just like, whoa, it's just like already like way better. Like he was just really on top of his game.
It was, and then he gets his own book, and I feel like his own book, he was just doing whatever. By the way, Dave, hello, hi Dave.
I did.
um, his own book, like he just threw everything out. He was doing content in a superhero book that we weren't seeing ever. And I mean, for me, I think it's kind of the same thing. I'm not an artist, but I didn't appreciate art until I met his art. It changed my world too because I didn't. Same thing. Like he took the words out of my brain. I didn't know art could look like this. I don't remember the first comic I got, but I started reading monthly. I started reading the first Wolverine series, the first ongoing. So that's Buscema art, and he's classic. He's Marvel style from the '70s. This was something different. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a gateway drug. Todd was like the intro, and like very quickly, I lived in a small town, but like there's a library that there's somebody who donated a bunch of like weird off the beaten path kind of comics. So very quickly right after this, I was exposed to Mobius and Iniki Bilal and Crumb,
Hmm.
and like a lot of like really weird stuff that was just like shocking. And so that was always like kind of the theme. Like it kind of there's like in a very short time, I was constantly getting my mind blown away, and it was just this coincidence of just having this stuff around that I think ordinarily people would not come across. Like I came across Airtight Garage very early. Like all that kind of stuff. It's stuff that most people, I mean, especially these days, don't even come across ever.
No, no.
So
It still happens to me on a a weekly, a daily basis. I mean, cultivating all of these comics that I do, whether they're for the collection or for sale, I'm seeing stuff that I never saw before. I mean, I'm new to Alex Toth. Like that's new to me.
oh
I'm
really?
yeah, like my comics knowledge or love is Marvel, it's McFarlane. It goes into that, but I didn't have anybody influencing me. Like you should read this, you should read this, and so I'm seeing this stuff for the first time, or I'm seeing it for the first time and putting a name to it. Mobius, I knew who that was, but when I watched Jodorowsky's Dune, the
Yeah.
the documentary, I was like, holy shit! One of the most fascinating things I've ever seen was that documentary.
That documentary is insane because the fact that Jodorowsky thought he could film that is insane.
I
Like the
know.
storyboard, like it's like 1975, and like I'm like, did you really think you could do that? Like it's like the shots he was planning and everything. It's like they were impossible at the time. You know what I mean? It's just like So
Yeah.
that's the craziest thing to me about that. Like a lot of people like to talk about, oh, the genius of Jodorowsky and that Dune would have been amazing. I'm like, I watched that video. I was like, that was impossible. Like not even near possible. He was trying to use the guys that created the effects for Dark Star.
I
You know
know.
what I mean? I'm just like, Jesus,
And
dude.
he had what? He had like Mick Jagger was signed on, and he had like all these crazy people that never would have worked together in a film. But you know,
Yeah, I think conceptually it was very interesting, but like I don't know if he realistically thought he could make that or not, you know? So it was interesting.
yeah. I mean, we'll we'll never know. But at the same time, like that documentary is at least some proof that there was a fully laid out concept. Just want to chime in here. Anti-hero, my buddy Avery said unrelated to what is being discussed, but if they ever do another V for Vendetta comic, he thinks that you should do the art for it because he loves your V, which I can attest
Oh,
to. I think that's such a fantastic piece that you put out there.
I appreciate that. I don't think I'm right for that book.
Yeah,
Um, I would be awful with Alan Moore, to be honest. I don't think I'd match his writing, you
fair
know?
enough. I mean,
Um,
it's hard to match that guy's writing anyone anyway.
it's just his artists, like Gibbons, like nobody else could have drew Watchmen. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense without him. And then you see like all the Watchmen sequels, none of them make any sense. You
No,
know what I mean? Like, um, yeah, sometimes you just need to be. It's like casting for a movie. Sometimes John Byrne used to talk about that all the time, or rant
Mhm.
about it all the time. And I think he's right in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? I would love to draw a V for Vendetta comic, and I would love to work with Alan Moore, but I think that'd be a tough casting. It would depend on the material more than anything, you know?
And then Brian just chimed in with, "What about Jason Pearson?"
Oh, Pearson's brilliant, man. I mean, I wish he would do more comics again, man. Again, he's another guy I enjoyed his later career. You know,
Yeah,
when he was like using the markers, when he started getting really stylized and really wild, you know, like his compositions are are you know, goddamn brilliant. You know what I mean? His last body bag stuff was really cool. I'm hoping he finishes the new one.
that brings to mind there was somebody that like I was thinking I have a list of a couple of names that I wrote down that I wanted to touch on. But are you aware of or a fan of? Do you know Frank Turan?
No.
Man, I got to pull that cover out. He did this amazing. He did a couple of covers for Punisher in like the mid to late '90s that were like towards the end of the when the comic book industry collapsed, and his Bullseye cover really invokes. When I look at your art, I'm like, man, kind of simpatico. But I'll grab that before we're finished or something
Okay.
like that. But speaking of just, I was thinking about the we talked about. I don't read a ton of new comics, but obviously I read some. Did you know that Mark Silvestri is doing a Batman Joker book right now for DC?
Yeah, I saw that. It looks pretty nice. The the,
It's
the
amazing.
panels I've seen. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's nice to see him working again because I thought he had nerve damage or something that kept him kind of from penciling anything
I've
in
never
the
heard
last
that.
decade.
That's news to me.
Because I remember hearing about it because he was not doing like maybe it was just an excuse not to sign a lot of conventions and stuff, but I had
Mm.
heard that he was yeah, I don't know, but I could be wrong about that. Let me throw something else under here because I wanted to ask you about this book. Speaking of you and your work, if you don't mind if we just
Mhm.
dive into this for a sec. So you did is this I guess this is just a fill-in issue for Scumbag?
Yeah, Scumbag is there's a different artist for every issue, typically.
Oh, is that what
Um,
it is? Okay.
yeah, I think towards the end they might have reused a couple or had a couple of the same artists go in again, but generally it's always different artists.
Okay.
So yeah, so like basically Rick asked me to do a fill-in. I was supposed to do an issue earlier than that, but like
Mhm.
scheduling didn't make sense. So, but I loved working on it. It's a great character. It's a great book. You know, like
It's
it's
fantastic.
really fun. Yeah.
Is that Eddie from
Yeah, I
Unfriended?
yeah, I think Rick actually asked for that in the script. I can't
Ah,
remember, but no, it was a lot of fun. I love the character. I would draw that character anytime Rick asked me to because I just think it's a cool character, you know.
yeah, and it's such so I wanted to ask you about like the chaoticness of this panel layout's fucking fantastic.
Thanks,
Um,
man.
and how long does it take you to just pump this out? Like just this two-page splash?
Well, generally breakdowns, I will break down what I need to like 5 pages. Yeah, basically I'll spend a week on breakdowns, and then when it comes to inking, I'll ink like a page a day.
Okay.
And this project was tough because I'm happy it came out the way it did. I was using a lot of different tools because I was in a rush to get this project done, because I was at the same time I was working on another graphic novel that's coming out probably early next year, and deadlines were just overlapping on top of each other. And comics, overlapping deadlines and illustrations one thing, overlapping deadlines in comics is a nightmare. So, but I'm very happy with how the issue came out. Everything just kind of fell into place. So I kind of lucked out on this one, even with the hectic schedule.
Cool. Yeah, it turned out great. I wish I could say that I know what's going on in the story, because I had never read Scumbag, but when I saw you were doing the issue, I was gotta pick it up.
Yeah, you kind of got to reference the other issues, but I actually, I mean, not even because I worked on it. I recommend Scumbag. Scumbag's a fun book.
Yeah, I mean, Rick's a good writer. I read I think it was Dave that told me that you guys know Jerome, and when Jerome and him were doing X-Force, that was the first time I think I'd ever read Rick's writing. And then I read Black Science, and followed him around here and there reading some of his stuff. The thing about Eddie that I wanted to ask you is just kind of the simple question that I know you've done a lot of, or at least a handful of gig posters, Metallica and Primus. Does music play a role in your creative process?
Oh yeah, absolutely, man.
Yeah.
It's a big deal for sure, especially the imagery. These days, I don't know, for a while now, I've been listening to stuff that like either the lyrics don't make sense, like you can't understand the lyrics, or it's just like instrumental. That's kind of where I've been lately, but I'm looking to change on that. So the music helps. I mean, it's a hodgepodge of everything, really.
Yeah.
So I'm not just listening to music when I'm working. I'm listening to a bunch of different things. You know what I mean? So
Okay. Yeah, I just always wanted to ask that because I watch Dave. I see Dave and you guys doing Prince, and I think you guys both did the same Primus tour, right? Was it the first time you did a Primus poster?
no, I did a Primus poster recently. I don't think Dave did one years
ago.
but
Yeah,
I
that's
could
what
be
I'm
wrong.
talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just
Yeah.
remember seeing his poster, and I think you did one on that tour too, right? Or am I wrong?
No, not on that tour. No.
Okay,
Like
I'm wrong.
the rock poster thing's a recent thing. I've been trying
Mhm.
to do it like for a long time, but it's only recently I've been in it. So it's one of those things, like I really want to do it, but it's been hard for me to like get opportunities going. So I'm working on that right now. So I'd like to do more weirdo bands, but the problem with that poster industry is they are only want to do bands that will make money, which is understandable in terms of selling the posters to collectors.
Mhm.
But I'm actually interested in doing like weird offbeat kind of posters. Like
Yeah.
that would be more fun to me.
Okay. So Dave did one in 2015, and then Avery said you should do a Tool one. But I mean, I know they do hire some artists, but Adam does, or they're in charge of their own stuff, right?
I have no idea. I mean, I think I want to say Adam's aware of my work, but I'm not exactly sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he is. I vaguely remember maybe seeing his name or him commenting, but I could be totally wrong on that. So, yeah.
Let's dive into the. All right, so I met you through Dave and Alex and the whole Zero Friends crew. Y'all were super warm and welcoming to some random dude that was often drunk at an art show, but how did you get to know, since Dave is a founding member of the Dave Avengers, how did you and Dave get to know each other?
Oh, I met Dave through Alex. So,
Okay.
because I met Alex very early on in 2000, one of my early shows. It just happened to be, out of all people, Dave Cho introduced me to Alex.
Ha!
Because I remember he brought Alex over to the table. He's like, "You guys should know each other," and it was kind of like that was that. So I started doing shows with Alex and Robert Bowen, and then Dave used to come by the table before Dave wasn't really involved. He was just came by. He was cool, and then we started doing tables with Dave. I mean, it's like that simple, you know what I mean? And then Dave just always kind of holds everything together, man. He makes sure I have tablecloth because I'm a mess. I can't get things together, but. Yeah, Dave kind of makes sure, like, I look presentable.
Dave's
so you should see it when I do shows
manager.
without. Yeah, so when I do shows without Dave, it's pretty It's pretty bad.
Well, that's okay. We all need a
Yeah.
Dave in our life to kind of
Yeah.
hold us together. And for me, I just have to look in the mirror. But you know, but then
Yeah.
you know, Dave gave me so much sound advice when I was starting this. That like I'm eternally grateful to him because like I don't know where I'd be. You know, like if I would have pushed myself as hard, but we were in the car and he was just like, dude, if you're gonna do this and you're gonna create YouTube content about comics, like you just got to do it. And
Yeah.
you know, here we are. I'm talking to you, and you know, on my YouTube channel for some reason. Uh, this is one of my favorite books of all time, the Last Zero Friends book.
Yeah.
And I just, you know, I remember seeing your stuff in person at Cotton Candy Gallery, and it's amazing. And you know, this stuff is no different. But what, Mobius, not Mobius. I'm
Mm.
sorry. What's his name? Oh God, I just forgot his name. Alien Geiger.
Mm.
How much do you? I mean, were you a fan of Geiger?
Yeah.
How much influence is he in your
I mean, obviously, I
brain?
mean, Geiger, and everybody of my generation, even if they draw like cute cartoon characters for Pixar, is influenced by Geiger
Yeah,
or Giger, whatever it is.
yeah,
And I mean, his influence is so just massive. It's like there's a game that just came out which basically ripped off the look of his stuff. Him and that other guy, Belinsky, whatever his name is.
oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, it's just that's how massive his stuff is. And his stuff's going to be massive for the next few years. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Or for the next decades. Like
Your
Giger is
century.
this. Yeah, like Giger's like that. You know, it's just he's, you know, it's like the Beatles. His people are going to influence him, or people are going to be influenced by him and not know it. It's kind of like
Mhm.
how everybody in the industry right now is influenced by Sid Mead and John Berkey, especially. But like they have no idea who John Berkey is. But everybody's influenced by John Berkey. Everybody who does people who designed Dune, people who designed whatever movie of the week that came out, they're all influenced by Berkey, but none of
Yeah,
them like know who Berkey is. You
I
know, like
don't.
that's going to be Giger.
I don't know
Yeah,
who
you
Berkey
know,
is, so there you go.
yeah.
But
So
I have a
you'd know
lot to learn.
Berkey's work if you saw it. You'd know it.
I'm sure.
You
I'm
know,
sure.
yeah,
You know, there's and that's the thing I really that's the thing about this channel and this show specifically is I like and I said it last week and me and Dave were talking about it like I like to dive in and I can use music as the best metaphor. I like to listen to bands, what influenced them, and then like you take it a step further and you listen, you try and figure out the influences of the influences, you know, the great grandfather.
yeah,
And so you know I had my buddy Joe Benitez on here and we were talking about Todd and talking about how you know he's super influenced by Michael Golden and Golden is the one that actually came up with the spaghetti webs and it's like
yeah.
who is Michael Golden influenced by? You know that's that those are the things that I like to learn and I like it's just interesting to me. Um,
Well, Golden came from painting like the sides of vans,
yeah,
like all like swords and sorcerers on the side of vans. He wasn't from comics,
right,
so
right.
that's why he kind of had a fresh point of view. Like he wasn't, as my understanding is, he wasn't really interested in comics or drawing it. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? So like, I think that's why he was able to be kind of unique. He's not from that background. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Uh,
um,
Berkey did the posters for the original Star Wars trilogy. Okay.
yeah, he did like some of the early. Yeah, you've probably seen those.
Yeah.
That's That's not what he's most well known for, like
Mhm.
stylistically, but that's probably what you've seen for sure.
Um, so Dave had told me a while ago that you love the Red Nails trilogy, and
Yeah,
it's funny because I love Barry Windsor Smith. I mean, I'm wearing a BWS shirt right now,
yeah.
but I never read a Conan book until this past week. This is the first Conan book I've ever read in my life.
I
Uh,
don't blame you. I mean,
yeah,
I'm not a huge fan of Conan, but I actually have a big Conan collection because of the artwork. But I'm not a big
right.
fan of Conan. So, but Red Nails is just one of those things. Like, just the artwork was just to me just paramount when I was like really young. Like one of
Mhm.
the pages you're coming up against. In, in another few pages. That was the one I came with. That one on the right.
This
I
one.
saw that. I saw a black and white version of that page when I was very young, and it just had an impression on me. So
Wow.
that was kind of like my first experience with Barry Smith, and then shortly after Weapon X came out, and I remember reading like interviews with him about how he was annoyed with Marvel even back then. About he's like, I have Wolverine running around naked, and then now I have to draw underwear on him because they won't allow it. I remember him something to that degree, you know.
Yeah. What did you what did you think of Weapon X when it first came out? Like what was your first, if you can remember, what your first impression of that artwork? Did it just
Oh,
blow
I mean,
you away completely?
yeah, because it's like I've never seen anything like that, you
Yeah.
know. I mean, it was a pretty far cry from his Conan work, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was pretty mind blowing, the Weapon X thing, and also like I don't know, maybe because I was a kid, it's one of those few instances where they kind of retconned a character's origin, and it
Hmm.
made sense because retcons, as far as I'm concerned, generally don't work even now.
No,
But not only did he retcon like his origin, he kind of made it the origin.
he did.
And again, it's like everything is based off of that. And it's like fun to yell like Jack Kirby, Stan Lee,
Yeah.
but like something like X-Men and like Weapon X has the same influence. All the X-Men stuff is the John Byrne Claremont stuff,
Hmm.
like in popular media. It has nothing to do with the Kirby Lee run.
No, it
You
has
know what I
nothing
mean?
to
And
do
it's
with
just
the
like,
Jim Lee run either.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
everything in the Wolverine, everything with Wolverine, all comes from Weapon X, basically. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's kind of the same situation, and I'm kind of, I'm kind of guessing the new Fantastic Four movies are going to be based on the Byrne run pretty heavily.
I would make sense. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I guarantee they're going to do the trial of Reed Richards
that
at
would
some
be
point.
interesting. And then
You know.
going forward, I was actually just having a conversation with my buddy Avery today, and I this might be lost on you, but I think a lot of the Kang stuff and the upcoming stuff is going to be based off Hickman's writing. He's been the premier Marvel writer for for like 10 years, but he kind of I don't know his stuff gets very not confusing. It just you run around in circles for a while until you come out the other end. But
Oh, I have no idea who Hickman is, but
yeah, I
I
like
mean,
I said,
Kang is another one of those things that's just weird to me. You take like a D-list character and like all of a sudden he's like the big bad. It's
yeah.
strange to me, but I haven't kept up with superhero comics since I was a kid. So like really like this is all new stuff to me, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I will make before we're done, I'm gonna make one suggestion to you. Actually, I'll just make it
Okay.
now. Do you know who Trad Moore is? Do you know
No.
the artist? There's a book he did called Silver Surfer Black. And
Oh,
it,
I've seen that. Yeah, yeah.
okay, all right. He just came
Yeah.
out with the Doctor Strange book. That's just as trippy.
Okay.
Uh but
Okay, interesting.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, with Barry Windsor Smith, it's funny, I didn't love the artwork when I first read Weapon X, but I loved the story. And then I think it was like the second time I read it, I was like, oh, this is so cool. And Dave said it. I mean, it was pretty violent for a Marvel book. It really was at the time. They
Yeah.
they didn't do much violence back then.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, you're probably right on that. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was a little graphic for the time.
Yeah, and it was I just remember, and I don't know if you got this same feeling, but we all knew before that Weapon X came out that it was coming out and that it was going to explore the origin of Guy that we really didn't know his origin. And it was like the first time I can remember that and Infinity Gauntlet were like the first two times I could remember being really excited months and months before the book came out for the book to come out. Like it was an event. It felt like an event, but it wasn't media sensation like Death of Superman or the breaking of Batman's back or anything like that. I
Yeah,
just
I mean, for me, I think I was just like too young, and I'm just like, in the McDonald's next to the comic store, looking at the newspaper I got from the comic shop. You know what I mean? And then the articles I'm reading, they're like the magazines at the library. So it's like in my case, a lot of what was available to me was like whatever was there. Like so, it wasn't like anticipation for what's coming out. It was just like go to the stand and see what's there. You know what
yeah,
I mean? Yeah.
I was a comic store rat. I mean, I was a total
Okay.
comic store rat. I could walk to my comic store in like 15 minutes. So that was great as a 12, 13, 14-year old. Just,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So this book, as I understand, is the book that got you into painting. Is that accurate?
Yeah, what happened was when I was in art college,
Hmm.
I was pretty stubborn. I was a pretty bad student at the time. So I skipped all the painting classes because I didn't think they were important. I took like one or two, and I was really bad at painting. So by the time I got into illustration, I still didn't know how to paint, and I was giving assignments to paint.
Hmm.
So a friend of mine in the computer lab who like he was big on painting comics. I remember discussing it with him, and the next day he literally brought me like a stack that was like of like 20, 30 comics.
Hmm.
And he goes, "This is how you're gonna paint. Learn how to paint." And then the one that stuck to me was Batman, Judge Dredd, and then he had a lot of issues of Oink and
Oink.
like some adventures come. Yeah, like John Mueller.
Okay.
And I was actually able to tell John Mueller is like art director on the new Diablo game right now. And I was actually messaged to John. I was like, "Listen, man, I learned how to paint from Oink, man." He thought that was kind of funny, but yeah, so that's how I figured out how to paint initially, especially like with Oink, but especially from that book right there. I
Yeah.
was able to kind of figure it out. I mean, my first assignments were bad, but at least I was able to actually do the assignments, whereas
Hmm.
before I saw these, I had no idea how to even approach them.
Bisley's such an interesting person to see his artwork. Like, even if I could, I could draw certain influences from it, but he's almost like it's weird how when you look at his some of his paintings, like this ship right here, it
Yeah.
looks like a puzzle. It looks like he put together a puzzle and he painted it. Like, I don't know. I get There's something that it does to my brain that I can't completely explain when I look at his work specifically. Um, and I don't know if it's something that you feel, but he is special. He always has been. It's
Yeah, I mean, me and Sam gush over his Doom Patrol covers from that era
Yeah.
because those Doom Patrol covers are wildly experimental. From even by today's standards,
Hmm.
and then because nothing's really experimental in comics right now, but like
Right.
back then, like those Doom Patrol comics were really fucking crazy. And yeah, I feel like he just plays with visuals more than he's
Hmm.
concerned about anything else. And I think he just builds and shapes, and I think he just kind of goes with what makes sense at the time. And the reason why I kind of get that feeling is, and I probably learned it from figuring out painting from this, is that I kind of approach things the same way as
Hmm.
well. So it's not so important to have like in front of me, like figure out a 3D turnaround of the ship, and what does it look like from all angles? It's just like, how can I make this piece work? Period. Whether
Yeah.
the angle's right or wrong. I mean, I'm sure there's good and bad to all that stuff. It's I learned very early on from Todd McFarlane from those videos he did in the '90s
That's
as I was a
right.
little kid. I remember him saying, maybe it was an interview I read, I don't remember, but like it was along the lines of, it doesn't have to be right or good, and, like, I think it had like, he's like, "It just needs to look cool," and
Yeah.
I could it's literally been so long, I think he was trying to express that he wasn't the best draftsman, but he was able to make it work, I think, and I could be totally off, but it was somewhere along those lines.
He's said that multiple times in even interviews within the last 10 years. Like, he is
Oh,
very much
really? Okay.
honest about that. And that's why I love him. I mean, I love him as a character. He's such an interesting person. He just doesn't seem like he cares, but I watched those process videos, those, that he had on, they're still all over YouTube, that used to be on Facebook, and he's just like, "Oh, we're gonna do like a quick 10-minute sketch of this." And I'm just like watching him do it. I'm like, how just simple things. He makes everything look so fucking cool.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And I feel like Bisley does the same thing. It's just wildly more dark chaotic as opposed to just regular chaotic.
Yeah, but with that approach, you run a lot of risks, and some things don't work. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Alex Toth is the total other way. Like he's the total like storytelling. He's concerned about storytelling more than
Right.
anything. You know what I mean? So he's like the other way around, and he probably wouldn't be too into like McFarlane and Bisley.
Probably not.
I'm assuming.
Speaking of the biz, I thought that this literally came into my lap this week.
Oh
And
yeah,
it's Biz doing the cover on your first Call of Duty Zombies book.
yeah,
And I thought
yeah.
that
It was
was
cool. It was
amazing.
cool. It was cool. It was fun. I love that first cover actually.
Yeah, it's a fantastic cover. It's a little bit more I guess, palatable for the mainstream, this cover. but not by
What?
much.
Well, what do you mean?
Like if you were, because they're catering to the video game industry, the video game people at, whereas this, I don't know if this speaks more to comic book people to me. This speaks more to video game people for me. That just in my opinion.
Yeah, but there's also like 30 years of difference between the two
Yeah,
books.
of
You
course,
know,
of
I
course,
mean,
of
or
course.
20 years, whatever it is, you know.
It's funny. I mentioned Trad Moore, and Justin Jordan wrote Trad's first book, The Strange Talent of Luther Strode, which was an
Okay.
Image book. But this was what is this? This is 6 years old now, 7 years old almost.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Was this the first time you ever worked with Dark Horse?
I think so. I think I did a like Halo short story for one of the
Okay.
trades before that.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay. Are you much of a gamer?
Yeah, I mean, I play like multiplayer stuff, not as much anymore, but I used to be good. I'm kind of losing all my skills at this point. It's probably an age thing, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, these days I'm playing Apex Legends, Call of Duty Warzone, whatever's free and whatever I can just kill people. I'm not interested in story-driven games or puzzle games. I just want to kill people. It's all that interests me.
I don't blame you. I played
Yeah.
GTA for like 4 years straight because that's all I really felt like doing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, all right. So you mentioned Toth, and you said I think you said you've never seen this before, but maybe you have.
No, I have. Yeah.
Okay. So I had discovered this, and we still got to get a copy for Dave because Dave wants a copy of this. But this is like one of the greatest Treasury editions ever created. I mean,
Is that Frank Robbins in the beginning, the opening story?
You mean
No,
this
that
story?
first page. Yeah, is that Frank Robbins?
This I don't know. It's no, it's not. It's Jack Spalding. Does that sound right?
It is? Okay.
Yeah, because Aragones does the table of
Yeah.
contents. But the Toad story in here, I wanted to skip to that, then we'll go back. This thing is a beautiful looking. I think this is this opening page, unbelievable.
He uses the worst pens in the world too.
Did he?
Yeah. That's how good he is. And I
Yeah.
don't say that lightly. Like he uses an awful felt marker from the 70s. It's still available today and it's the worst marker you could buy, but he's that good.
And that's why it looks the way it does. Maybe that's what gave his stuff so much character. Is that maybe?
I feel like he did it on purpose. He wanted those limitations so that he was forced to simplify because he's really big on simplifying. Now Harvey Kurtzman gave him shit for it. Harvey Kurtzman thought some of it was bullshit, but I don't know. Generally, it works.
There's a lot of interesting stuff when you talk about some of these guys that worked in the from the early days in the golden age through to the silver bronze age. But how did you come into what's like your first experience with Toth?
I really enjoyed his Black Canary story he did for one of those it's one of those 70s books that was they had different superheroes in them. I forget what it's called right now.
But he did Strange Adventures, maybe.
But like he did a Black Canary story that's pretty iconic. That was very just on a storytelling level, just everything about it, like stylistically, it just all like clicked and worked, and it's just a beautiful story.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one I remember like first impressing me. You know what I mean? But I enjoy like the stuff he did for DC. I like his romance stuff where he had other inkers. I think that stuff's really interesting because it's like it has a finesse to it that you're not able to do with those shitty markers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I still prefer it when Toe thinks himself. That's when I think he's best. But I enjoy his romance stories quite a bit.
Okay. I have yet to come across any of those, but I'm very well aware of like some of the DC stuff like that has like on the opposite side of that, there's some of that Archie horror stuff that has some Neil Adams work on the covers, and you just don't see it that often. Another high praise from Dave, or maybe he's just calling you old-fashioned. An amazing thing about Wayshak is that he knows what pens and brushes all artists use, even cartoonists from the 50s and 60s.
Oh yeah, it's embarrassing. Like I'll tell you, so Toth was using the Pentel sign pen, which is still available today. You can go to Michael's and buy it. It's a piece of shit.
I mean, but that's like, Another, we can throw it back to music. Some of these guys using, guitars from the 60s that, they bought in a shitty store and, they were available everywhere, but some guys can just make them sing.
Yeah.
It's the artist. And another person I would love to talk about, and I can never stop talking about, but we got to get to the pinup first because it's absolutely brilliant. Bernie Wrightson.
Yeah.
Is there anything about, besides the all around awesomeness of Bernie, is there anything that sticks out in your mind that's like super influential for you from Bernie?
Bernie was not influential on me, really,
No.
but he was influential on a lot of guys. Like that entire era. When you talk to guys like that were like kind of working in the 80s and 90s, like they were all like Bernie's one of those guys that like he influenced everybody. And I don't use
Right.
that term lightly. Like he influenced everybody, so yeah, I mean, this is the era of Bernie stuff that I like the most too. Just like before he got like too detailed, when he was just like
Mhm.
kind of doing just like a lot of like really like fluid brushwork. I mean,
Yeah.
all that stuff's fantastic.
It surprises me that I didn't mean to assume that he was influential on you directly, but
Yeah,
it's yeah. I mean, like you said, Stephen King cites him as an influence. That's
I'm
some
sure.
praise right there. Were you ever a Neil Adams fan? Of
Oh
course.
yeah, Neil changed everything,
Yeah.
and then you can't say that enough. Neil changed everything. Neil like kind of led the way.
Yeah.
That was a Gil Kane story too, by the way. But like,
Oh.
um, but no, like Neil led the way. You know what I mean? He kind of changed everything. He was able to like he brought realism into the game, but like kept the dynamics of Kirby.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? He respected that. He kind of respected what he was the medium he was going into, as opposed to like some of the other guys who were just wanted to keep it like a realistic romance strip. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but no, Neil's groundbreaking. Those Batman stories,
Oh,
and then the Dead Man stuff.
they're
I
amazing.
mean, the Green Arrow stuff, like or Green Lantern stuff. It's all like, iconic.
Yeah. I mean, he even like when he did his cup of coffee in the X-Men. I mean,
Yeah,
he creates havoc, literally the character
yeah,
Havoc, and it's yeah, he's such an influence across time. I feel like you can say people will still be talking about him 50 years from now when they're talking about comics because right, you changed Batman, you changed all these characters, and I didn't really know when I was a kid, when I was 8 buying Batman books, I didn't realize that what I was looking at was all because of Neil Adams. You know.
yeah. I mean, and a lot of credit has to be given to his anchors too, as well. Like
Hmm.
Dick Gioriano. I'm saying that wrong, and Tom Palmer. Like from that era, like they did a lot of. They were really a big part of his of why his stuff looks so good. It's in the same way like Alan Davis, Mark Farmer
Hmm.
really does a lot to like really make the work look brilliant. You know what I mean? So like you can't take that away. It wasn't just Neil in a
Right.
way.
But and then you hear the stories, and if we're just putting the artwork aside, you hear the stories about him being the guy to open his mouth when people needed somebody standing up for them, and it was him.
Yeah.
Which is another huge thing. And the Kirby legacy and the whole thing with the artwork going back to the creators, you know, really in part by Neil just not shutting up.
Yeah, I mean, he was helping the Superman guys. I forget the details as to why he was doing that, but yeah, he did that. There's also a lot of stories of him being very helpful to young artists.
Hmm.
So in terms of like helping young people start out and stuff like that, you'll always hear good things about Neil.
Yeah, yeah. I yeah. All right. Well, I'll throw this under.
Okay.
Dave McKean.
Yeah.
Anything? I mean, I love Sandman's my all time favorite comic, and so the McKean covers are they're all etched in my mind. But you had talked about Hellblazer 40, which I didn't have, so I just
Yeah.
put out Hellblazer 37.
Well, it's in the same style as this one.
Hmm.
it was later, I think it is, because what is that issue's like, what, 20 something? Am
This
I
is
right on that?
27.
Yeah, so like it was later than that, much later than that. And no, it was interesting for me because it was another one of those comics. I don't remember where I got it. Um, I almost feel like it was like something from like a 50 cent bin in Walgreens or something like that. But
Ah,
it was like it was very different. It was like shockingly different. And that's like kind of what it was. I mean, and it led me to find out about Barron's story because all this stuff, like this era of McKean, is heavily influenced by Bill Sienkiewicz, but especially Barron's story, and especially that issue I had. So that's why it was so important for me. Like I like things that show me like what can be done with the medium as an art form,
mhm.
and like this is when I was really young, and it kept like kind of bringing me along, showing me what was possible, what can be done with the art. It didn't have to look like John Romita, John Buscema, Jim Lee. Like there are alternatives, and that's why that was important. And again, it led me to Baron Story, who is the genius of geniuses, and I don't think anybody would argue with me on that.
T-
Who
uh,
knows? Who knows their shit? You
Tell
know?
me the for the uninitiated who that is.
Yeah. So Baron Story is an illustrator from the '70s, probably best known for making the Lord of the Flies cover. That
Oh
if
yeah.
we all had to read that in the '80s, and if you
Mhm.
had it, is the Baron's cover. And Baron was a big time illustrator. He eventually went into teaching, and his influence was basically he kept a lot of journals, and basically stylistically, all these guys like McKean, Kent Williams, John Muth, George Pratt, they're all like Sienkiewicz in a way. They're all like kind of influenced by Barron's stuff. And then it really got to the forefront where somebody like McKean broke through, like on these issues where they're heavily influenced by Barron. And I mean heavily. And so Barron was able to do like some books. He put out the Marat Sot journals, which was huge, which was nobody bought it, but it was a fantastic book. You know what I mean? And Barron's more known for his influence these days.
Right. Well,
And
there's place for that.
and it's just drawing, and I mean the guy's on another plane of existence. Like he draws that well conceptually. He's like that. There's nobody like Barron. And Barron, it's funny when I've sat in on some of Barron's classes. Barron forgets that, Barron is like light years beyond anybody, and like he's trying to teach these college students these things, but his purpose is more to open people's minds to possibilities. You always need like guys like that, and they're very few and far between, those kind of artists,
Yeah.
because most artists are about drawing, and especially today they're like, buy my tutorial, and they're like, oh, you need to do this to get into the business, or this is how you need to make money. Baron doesn't give a shit about any of that. Baron just is interested in being good, and he doesn't care about anything else. And that's, you need guys like that, and there aren't enough of them.
Well, you named some names, Pratt and Muth, and we've got Dave McKean here. And one of the things that I love about these issues is we're used to seeing McKean's covers because they're these, beautiful multimedia, giant collage things. But we rarely get to see interiors from him in comics, and that's one of the things that sticks to me in this story. And I'm gonna have to find and track down the issue you told me about because I've never read, or I read it in trade, but it's something special to hold a floppy that's a standalone story by him. And Gaiman's my favorite writer, period. And so the two of them working on an issue that wasn't Sandman and seeing McKean do interiors was something beautiful to me. And it's somebody somebody you mentioned, which I half of my show revolves around me singing a ridiculous song about him, is Bill Sienkiewicz Sankowitz. Bill
Yeah.
Sienkiewicz Sankowitz. So, I mean, for me, I feel like he's the David Lynch of comics. Acquired taste. I didn't look at this as a kid or look at any of his work as a kid except Wolverine 10. That's a different story. But when I saw this, I was like, I don't get it. As a kid, do you remember like the first time you saw anything by the Sankster?
Yeah, my first exposure to him was Daredevil Love and War.
Mm,
So that was just, and again, this is shortly after the McFarlane thing. So like that big thing was like, I lived in San Jose, so like my sister would go like have ice skating lessons. So I was thrown in the Walden books for about you know, however long it took her to do that. So like for like literally like a couple months, I would look at the same graphic novels every week, you know,
Mhm.
just sit there and sit in the store. Nobody bought them because they're always there. And like Daredevil Love and War was one that freaked me out. Like when you're like 10, 11 years old, you can't make heads or tails of that, you know, and
No.
it was just freaky because like it was like, but I kept looking at it, but I didn't understand any of it, you know, and it always kind of stuck with me because like for me, like at that place, like I was always looking at the long shot trade. I was always looking at Asgardian Wars, the Thor, the Balor, the Beta Ray Bill. And then
Yeah.
there was a how-to book by Boris Vallejo on how to do fantasy painting. So
Oh,
those were things
wow.
I looked at every weekend for like months as like a 10 or 11-year-old, you know, and those were very informative for me. So by the time I saw this, I kind of knew,
Mhm.
like, I kind of came across this later because I stopped collecting comics like through most of high school, most of junior high and high school. By that time, I wasn't reading anything. So,
Right.
um, but I came across this later in college, and by then, like, I was pretty into it. I mean, for me, the big influence is probably Stray Toasters. That's
Oh,
like the
yeah.
big one for me. Um, but yeah, Bill's the guy who like knocked down all the doors. Like,
Mhm.
I think it's really easy to say McKean was the one, but he kind of followed way after Bill. Like Bill kind of did all the hard work, you know.
Yeah.
And Bill is actually wildly more experimental than McKean ever was,
For sure.
you know.
No, I agree with that.
And yeah, I wish Bill would do more comics, you know. But
His work though is, I mean, he's prolific. Like I I had you know, like this idea or hope. I was like, okay, I buy all these collections from people. I get all these comics. Eventually, I'll have everything that Sankiewicz has ever done. I've already got a fucking short box filled up, and I need to get another one
yeah,
because there's just so much stuff. Like the man seemingly has either he's so quick in his process, but he maybe there's two of him and he found how to clone or he went back
no,
in
he's
time.
fast. He's
It's
really fast. I remember there's an interview where he talked about he made like Electra pages like one an afternoon. Like
yo, Jesus.
he was doing Electra like very fast at that time. And he's a fast artist, you know. He's really
Mhm.
quick.
Yeah, and his ability to do, you know, like you look at some of the New Mutant stuff, or you look in here with some of the different like kind of almost child cartoonish stuff that he does in here. eh, I feel like he could do anything. This man is so talented.
Yeah, I think Frank Miller said he was just kind of working. I think this is that era where Frank was like working with a lot of different artists and he was kind of playing to their strengths, like he did with
Right.
Mazzucchelli on Born Again.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that so that's why I think these books came out this way. Like I don't think Frank planned them this way, you know, but he let them kind of organically become, I think, what the artists wanted to express more, you know,
Sure.
which
Sure.
I thought was cool because like Born Again is like classic, like Frank Miller stuff, and then
Mhm.
Mazzucchelli is not someone who you would think would be like a good fit with Frank Miller, but I mean, there's nobody more perfect, really. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a fantastic, fantastic run. Uh,
Yeah,
I, I reread it maybe like about a year ago. It's just like, oh, I need something that's heavy and torturous. So I read that.
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
you know, Miller. I would you do you have any like you know art aside any favorite writers? You know, like is there anybody that you would say, oh, that's like one of my favorite writers in comics that you could,
Um,
you know, if art was no part of it.
Off the top of my head, I'm not, I mean, I like Claremont.
Mhm.
I think Byrne is interesting sometimes, but they're like Byrne's like an artist writer.
Yeah, yeah, he's
Uh,
the best of both.
yeah, I'm not sure. I'm
Huh.
not sure.
Well, it's always something we could you could come back to if you think of it.
I mean, see, like I'm gonna say Eisner again, because he did Contract with God. That's another one where I'm like, no, but he's the artist too.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
to me,
it always seems to work out when it's like a writer artist.
right?
Like that's how a lot of manga is still made. You know,
Hmm.
American comics have no interest in letting the artist do anything. They want the writer to do everything. So it's a totally opposite process. You know.
Yeah, it's changed a lot too. Like, it's definitely more of a writer-driven medium in the last 20 years of comics. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's that's a blowback from what happened at the end of the 90s. I mean, it's a total
Yeah,
blowback because
yeah,
everything was so bloated, in our like when we were going into our late teens, early 20s. The pushback was, all right, well, I guess we'll get some of these guys that know how to write, and then Image became super successful because of that, because you had Kirkman and you had Brian K. Vaughan, these guys who were basically writing cinematically, or at least in the way that you would write a TV show. And well, look what happened. It turned into
yeah.
the biggest industry.
I was lucky enough to work a couple of projects where I got to work the Marvel style, and I prefer that. But nobody will work that way anymore. So
Yeah.
it just allows for better pacing and better storytelling for my sensibility. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's different for other people, but yeah, I prefer that style.
I mean, I think some of the best books came out of that style. So, you look
Well,
at,
that's why there's so much debate about those early issues.
yeah, yeah.
That's why
It's
Ditko hated Stan until he died. So my
well,
understanding is by the later issues, Stan was barely involved.
yeah,
That's what
yeah,
Ditko claimed, and I believe that too. He's like, Stan just wrote the word bubbles, and I pretty much believe that.
yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of like the Marvel style and the classic stuff, I read it was last year, but I finally sat down and read the entire Silver Surfer Galactus trilogy, Fantastic Four, 48, 49, and 50. It's like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in a
Yeah,
superhero comic, but they're like, you get through half of that issue and you're like, I can't read this text anymore. I just can't, you
I actually
know.
like Stan's text. I like Stan's text. I
I
think it
I
adds a lot of personality. Like if you see Jack's Fantastic Four stuff and compare it to the fourth world stuff, you'll
Yeah,
see like how much Stan contributed. You know.
right. And it's like half of it I can stomach, half of it I can't. I just feel like it's
Yeah.
bloated. You're reading like the same thing over and over. But at the same time, that shit was so unique back then. It was so different, and it was, him and what they did on that book specifically, Fantastic Four was mind blowing. It
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
was. I recently flipped through X-Men #2. I didn't love that as much. I gotta say, I
Really.
didn't. Yeah, it wasn't. I went through it on one of these episodes, and I was just like, it's cool to look at, but like the storytelling, and it's like, you know,
Well, I don't think X Men really had a personality until Cockrum and Byrne were involved. You
yeah,
know,
yeah. Cockrum was,
and
I,
Claremont.
yeah, and art wise, like you look at Wolverine. Wolverine was my favorite character growing up, and you see Byrne and Cockrum drawing him, and you're just like, I don't know who's better because they're so awesome.
I've always liked Byrne better, but that's
Yeah,
that's preference. So
right, right.
yeah.
Who is your who is do you have like anybody you'd like to work with in the comic field that you haven't ever worked with, whether it's a writer or another artist?
Um, I'm working with Skinner right now. I'm trying to finish that comic I'm working on with him.
Right, right.
Or Cody Goodfellow wrote it, but it's for Skinner's comic. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think about that much,
Yeah.
honestly. Like I'm sure. I mean, I would love to work with Todd. I would love to work. I mean, there are people I want to work with, but like in
Mhm.
terms of an actual collaborative project, I don't know.
Okay.
Because I'm kind of more interested in my own projects. You know. Yeah, I'm just kind of more interested in doing my own thing right now. So I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that sounds bad, but I mean, there are definitely people I want to work with, but there's no like, oh, I want to work with so and so and like have them write a script and I want to draw their script. There's no really desire for that. I guess the only person I would want to, and this would never happen, but the only person would be probably Otomo, the guy who did Akira.
Yeah, yeah, Katsuro Otomo.
That's probably the only one that I can think of off the top of my head because he's such a huge creator to me artistically and writing wise, like that would be a big deal for me.
That man, I mean, I'm not a huge I don't know a ton about him, but what I do know is his process and how much work he did in such a
Yeah.
short time is unbelievable. It's Kirby level. I mean, like you look at those two guys and then you hear the legends of, Kirby, how fast he worked, and you hear about Atomo and how fast he works.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you look through some of those Akira issues and I'm like, how? You know?
Yeah, I saw his schedule. His schedule's insane. He would do like 15, 20 pages a week. I talked to a friend of mine an acquaintance of mine who is the first American ever to work in the Japanese manga industry. And I asked them, now these days you actually hear stories about manga creators. Like years you would
Mhm.
hear nothing on them. And I'd ask him about all these careers. I'm like, is this true? Like the pace they're working at and everything. He goes like, yeah, it's all true. He goes like, it's that crazy out there. He's like, none of it's like really exaggerated, you know? So like, even like Otomo, like he's not huge. And I mean, he's well known, but he's not like the guy who did Dragon Balls. But like,
Right.
even like I'm reading articles on him from other creators, and I didn't realize how influential he was and how much his early work was considered experimental,
Hmm.
to the point where I read one interview where one of these manga artists talked about how he was disappointed in Akira because he felt Akira was very safe and very mainstream.
Oh,
Which, if you read through Akira, I think you could feel that way when you get through the beginning, but by the time you get to the end, Akira is not a mainstream book, you know.
mhm.
Um, but it's just interesting because I didn't really know how well he was regarded in Japan until recently, actually.
I've never read the whole thing, but it is something that I am putting. I have this weird thing with my collection. It's like I can't read the whole thing until I have all the issues.
Oh yeah,
I know it's collected. I know I could buy the
yeah,
hardcovers, but I want all the single issues and then I want to read it.
yeah. But
It's a
you
weird
got to see it in black and white. It's not even supposed to be in color, man.
exactly. So
Yeah,
the epic the Marvel epic the square bound ones are in black and
yeah.
white. So uh,
No, the
I
epic
don't.
ones are in color.
Oh, they are.
The single issues.
Oh, the
I don't know.
single issue.
Yeah, it's like one of the first examples of computer coloring.
That's right. Nope. Look
Yeah.
at me proving me wrong on my own program. I gotta go.
Like I said, it's embarrassing the stuff I know from certain
Yeah.
eras.
We just had a Chip and Mangaka are amazing most ever, like 3 pages in a day, right? Right. It's like, but
Yeah.
they have a well-oiled machine, and I don't know. I'm not well versed in manga. I'd love for people to give me a recommendation for what to read. You know, I heard there's some. What's the one that everybody reads now? Berserk. Is that it? I think.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to that one yet. Yeah.
Yeah. But
I've been reading like some more mellow ones recently. Yeah.
have you ever been over there? Like, have you ever been over to
No, I
Japan?
would like to one day. You know, I'd like
Yeah.
to make my way over there. And there's that art store that everybody goes to when they go over there that I guess is several stories tall, and they get all their Zipatones and all that stuff like that. So I'd like to go
Yeah.
there, you know.
Yeah. Do you watch because cartoonist kayfabe Pisker just spent like the last 3 weeks there.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, and I've been watching his stories, and he's brought home like 5 suitcases worth of like manga and stuff like that. But it's very
Yeah.
interesting to hear about it as somebody that doesn't know anything about it. What are you working on right now, by the way?
I'm still under it. I still can't say.
Okay.
I wish I could. Believe me, I wish I could. I just finished a big project, and I just recently just did like a few extra pages. I just finished them Friday.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I mean, outside of the project I'm doing, the 15-page short I'm doing for Skinner's thing,
Mhm.
um, which is Skin Crawl number 3, whenever that's coming out.
Right.
Yeah, I can't talk about anything right now. Wish
Alright.
I could,
What's
you know, but
myopia?
hopefully soon.
What about myopia?
Oh,
Can you talk about that since you post about it?
yeah, so that's just like a personal project right there. It's basically a sketchbook that I kept that at the time I was working on a lot of projects and I needed
Mhm.
something that was purely my own. So I would just work on a page in the sketchbook, like freestyle, whether I painted it or drew it. And then
Mhm.
I eventually decided to publish them. And now it's become like a series. I'm working on the fourth issue, and I'm trying
Cool.
to speed up putting those issues out, you know, because that's my favorite project. It's kind of the bastard child of Chicken's Revolt. It's the same concept where you kind of just sit down and freestyle something and put
Mhm.
it out, except there's no kind of storytelling to it. It's just images, you know. So
Cool.
it's like an art book. It's the purest form of what I want to do right now,
Mhm.
you know. So I also have like a comic anthology that I put out, Disintegration, a couple years ago. Issue 2 was done about a year and a half ago,
Oh,
and
wow.
I scrapped it because I wanted to take something out. I might just finish it and put it back out. So I don't know, but I'm also working on a comic anthology too. This last project I've been on for 2 years,
Oof.
and that ate up all my time. So I could. That's why my personal projects were kind of put on hold, because when you work on comics, you can't work on anything but comics.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll never get it done. So that's always, I want to work in the comic industry. I love comics, but that's a double-edged sword. If I'm on a project, I can't do any of my own stuff. So that's why things constantly get delayed with me, because if I'm on a
Mhm.
project, I just can't do anything.
It makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of art that goes into a comic. There's a lot on one page. Then you throw more pages in, and you finish the whole book, and well, you got to go with the next issue.
Yeah.
So, uh, well, I hopefully we'll get to hear what that secret project is. But let's get back into something that I'm more curious about to hear your knowledge on. So,
Mhm.
um, I know Wally Wood. Wally Wood. I'm very aware of who he is. I can say I don't know nearly as much as I want to. So I just you mentioned he's one of your, one of the influences you really, or one of the artists you really love. And so I pulled out Daredevil #8. Now, where does your love for Wally Wood come from? Is it Daredevil or is it
Oh,
something else?
no, I mean, I actually don't care about his Daredevil stuff
All
at all. Like,
right, well, fuck that.
yeah, his Marvel stuff, like, I just don't couldn't care less about. But like, um, I mean, it's Wally. Wally's
Yeah,
like always gets the shaft, and on the Daredevil TV show, he got the shaft again.
yeah,
He like made the red suit and the Billy clubs, and then he got no thank you for it. Like
yeah,
Wally, that's just Wally's fate, man. And then but I like the EC stuff. I think the Mad stuff he did was brilliant. The
right.
stuff he did for EC and Mad was just absolutely brilliant. And like, when you do work like that, you just live forever. And again, it's one of those people that just influences everything. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? To this day, you know.
I I still have it. I have a copy of Weird Science 22, which is that fantastic cover, which is I think the last issue of the first or second volume. And yeah, I just like the exposure to his work just never came into my life. Like it's
Really?
yeah, I didn't have. It's funny because with comics, I didn't have like my older brother like Green Lantern, and then he clocked out of comics real quick.
Yeah.
So my influences were whatever I was reading and whatever I could find. And nobody ever exposed me to Silver Age, and especially not Golden Age. My dad had classic comics, but that shit was garbage. Still
Yeah,
is. It still is. Every time I
yeah.
come across a classic comic, I'm like, I don't want to read this. But
Yeah.
but Wally Wood is not somebody like he was out of comics, and I don't know when he died, but he was out of comics long before.
No,
I
he was trucking along till the end.
really was he?
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
He died in like I think the early '80s, killed
okay, yeah,
himself. He had a lot of assistants at that time. He was doing some pornography type stuff, like some military stuff. He was doing a lot of like the DC horror stuff, you know.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, he has, you could find that thing online, the 21 people, or 21 panels that always work. He's also known for saying, um, if you can't, like something along the lines, if you can't draw it, swipe it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
He's one of those guys.
yeah,
But no, well, he's a legend. Did it all with the brush. I mean, he had a hard time. He had a hard life, but
yeah. He had
a
battles with
lot of those guys.
alcoholism too, right?
Well, a lot of those guys in that era. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? He was the best for a while, and he knew it. And he had a bad attitude. Like again, like a lot of those guys from that era. So
Yeah.
John Buscema. The funny thing about John Buscema is he's known for like what do you know, John Buscema? What do you think he's famous for?
I mean, for me, I Conan. I would think
Yeah.
Savage Sword and then early Strange Tales.
Yeah, so
Or
my understanding is Conan's the only book he enjoyed drawing. He hates
yeah,
superheroes. You know what I mean? So and a lot of the guys from that era, they don't like any of that shit. That's the funny
right.
part about all that stuff. You know what I mean?
But it seemed like the at least the EC Comics crew were all proud of the stuff that they were doing, or at
Well,
least
that stuff is well written. That
yeah,
stuff is really good. And like in eight pages, the EC stuff tells better stories than 6 issues of whatever Eisner winning book that came out this year. And I'm not even joking. I'm not even
no, I know,
exaggerating.
I know you're not. I
Like
mean, I
the Harvey Kurtzman war stuff is like more experimental than what is classified as experimental today.
I mean,
And like
yeah,
it's just brilliant stuff.
The Johnny Craig covers on shock suspense stories are
Yeah,
unbelievable.
yeah.
Like 70 years has come and gone, and nobody's really done anything like that.
Yeah,
You
but
know?
I can't emphasize enough the Harvey Kurtzman war stuff is
Mhm.
just brilliant. I can't express into words how brilliant the Harvey Kurtzman war stuff is. I mean, it's
Oh.
unbelievable, that stuff.
Eh, um, what about do you know much about Matt Baker? I was just thinking about war stuff, and he was 50s, doing fight Marines and stuff like that.
No,
Okay,
not
yeah,
familiar with his work, yeah.
okay. A lot of people talk about him, and I've had a couple of books of his, but the EC Comics stuff, the reprints are the only thing you can find. Like, finding any of that, pre-code horror or pre-code war stuff is just it's like pulling gold out, you know?
Yeah, I mean, but they reprint it to death, so it's not I mean, it's not like it's hard to get,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So
Do you ever we last week on this program I took a look at I did a top down flip through of the EC covers, the artist edition, and
mhm.
it just made me fall in love. It's like Feldstein and Johnny Craig and Wally Wood, and there's like one Frazetta piece in there, and there's one John Severin piece in there, but seeing their original artwork from the covers, like I not even seeing the interiors, and I just got this feeling like, yeah, the comics have not ever reached this level since. They've
No, I
changed.
mean no, I mean, I mean, there's always good stuff, and,
Yeah,
but, um, it's its own unique thing, and it lives in that world. It's like the first Star Wars movie. It lives in that
yeah,
world. It's a product of its time, and it's brilliant. You know what I mean? And
mhm,
it's just unique. It's its own thing. There's
yeah.
Star Wars, and then there's Logan's Run. You know what I mean? You got to think about it that way.
Right, right, right.
Yeah,
And the one thing that the EC stuff did, it caused people to literally panic, to have such a panic that
yeah,
they had a Supreme Court case about it. You
yeah.
know,
I mean,
that's
it's just one of those things. Happens
yeah.
every few years. You know.
Yeah, we went through it as in our younger age with the music, with the censorship label. People
I
lost
mean,
their shit.
it didn't do anything though.
No,
You know
no,
what I
not at
mean?
all.
It didn't
No,
end the publishing. Like, I mean, it ended that company. Like those hearings. But music, it didn't do anything.
no, they tried, but
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
so let me show because we talked about you talked about oh somebody just asked. Here we go. We got a question. Do you have any opinions on Howard Chaykin?
I like Howard Chaykin stuff. I mean, the American flag stuff. Um, I think is, I think visually and storytelling wise, I think it's like absolutely unique and brilliant.
Mhm.
It's something that needed to be brought into comics at the time. You know what I mean? Again, it's like more of an eye opener. I thought American Flag was very cool. I always liked Howard Chaykin's stuff. It's weird.
Yeah.
Um, but he's on his own trip. You know what I mean? Like he kind of just does his own thing.
It's
You
good.
know?
It's a
Yeah.
interesting person to hear speak to. I've watched a couple interviews with him, and he's
Oh, really?
very, very opinionated. But
A lot of those guys are. I mean, nobody's more opinionated than Barry Smith. You
not even
know,
John Byrne.
John Byrne's pretty bad. I mean, but the thing is, John Byrne's smart. He's insulting, and um, he's you don't agree with everything he says, but he's actually very smart and very observant. That's why I
Mhm.
find John Byrne interesting when he rants.
Yeah, I mean he likes to rant. He likes to rant a
Yeah.
lot. Um, actually, there's somebody I wanted to ask you about, and I don't know if he, has a. I don't know if he has an influence on your work, but I'm sure you're a fan. Clive Barker, leaving.
Not really a fan. I don't know his
No,
work. No, like even
really.
in
Okay,
the past,
strike
like
three.
maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, I finally read The Hellbound Heart.
Uh huh.
Um, I like the first two Hellraiser movies. That's about the extent of my knowledge of Clive Barker. So I don't know much more beyond that. But I like the first Hellraiser. I genuinely like the first Hellraiser movie. It's
Yeah,
creepy. It's interesting.
I like the first two. I read. It's funny. I read Hellbound Heart over. It's probably like the first month of the pandemic or second month of the pandemic. I'm like, I never read this before. It was enjoyable. It was very
Oh,
enjoyable.
I think it's a great short story. I really should take time to read more of his stuff, but I just never get around to it.
Yeah.
I was interested to see that the new Hellraiser movie, they're kind of trying to go off the book a little bit more in terms of Pinhead's visual,
Yeah.
but the rest of the movie, they didn't give two shits about the source material. You know what I mean? Like that movie was bad. Like I don't
Yeah,
know.
I thought it was I the panicking kids and yeah, I didn't like it. I
Yeah,
was
you
bored by
know.
it.
So I was very the trailer really had me kind of what I was really interested with the trailer because I was like they were really making an effort to make Pinhead kind of more like the book. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
just didn't work out. So
Well, it's funny because his art, and I don't know if you've ever seen his art, but
I've
his
seen his art. Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting, and I assumed wrong, and I'm shamed. I'm shamed.
No, people try to guess what my influences are. People don't know what my influences are. I'm influenced by a bunch of like different things, and it's not stuff that you would think.
Right. Well, you
You
talked
know what I
about
mean?
you mentioned some names that I wasn't completely aware of, but you mentioned Jules Pfeiffer. Is it?
Yeah.
Could you talk about him for a bit? I'm
So
like,
he was a cartoonist for the Village Voice, and
mhm,
he's a big deal to me even now. And he's a political cartoonist. He did a comic strip, and it was just a lot of it left leaning, but
yeah,
like it was just very much very just comics about just commentating on the times. And it
yeah,
wasn't like political cartoons where you see like a picture of Bill Clinton or a picture of Donald Trump, and then they're like, you know, make some statement about their policy where they make like a caricature, which is typically what you see from political cartoons. This was more about like just social issues and people. And it
hmm
ran in the Village Voice until like I guess he died. I'm not sure about that, but you know, he was known for having the dancer. He drew very quick with a fountain pen, and they're very just direct and very simple. And he actually helped write a lot of the early spirits. He's from like
okay,
Eisner's crew, believe it or not.
mhm,
Like it's hard for you. You don't know his work, but if you see his work, you'll be like, "Oh, he's from Eisner's crew." You wouldn't believe it. But like, I'd like a lot of my influences from cartooning. You know, I consider myself a cartoonist more than anything, and cartooning is what I respect most out of anything. You know, that's why I like Jack Davis,
mhm.
Hank Ketchum, Charles Schultz,
Oh
Milton
man,
Caniff, like all
I,
those guys. Like that's cartooning is my thing. So that's what I mean by like you wouldn't know what my
yeah.
sources are because I come from mostly cartooning, like John Kay. It's a shame what that what happened to what John Kay. You know that John Kay was the person he was, but
Yeah,
I'm just talking about his art. You know what I mean?
yeah. I
Where
mean,
John Kay was a big deal. You know?
Ren and Stimpy's not the reflect. You know, it's its own thing.
Yeah, yeah. You know, so you know,
Um,
but the documentary on John Kay is good. I actually suggest people watch it. It's an interesting
okay,
documentary. Yeah.
all right. I it's one of the documentaries. It's funny. Me and Dave watched the Crumb documentary. Like I don't know, it was like last year. We were some doing something and we were
Is
hanging
that the
out.
first time you've seen
It's
that?
the first time I saw it. Holy
Yeah.
shit! I mean,
That's
I'm very aware of Crumb my whole life. You know, that art
yeah.
was somewhere within the vicinity of my life. You know, whether it was on a record cover, whatever. But not knowing about him and then watching that, oh my god,
Oh
such
yeah.
a fascinating family.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only movie I've seen that I feel like shows how horrible it is to be an artist.
Yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean? It's the only accurate portrayal I've seen of being an artist. Like that's why I like that movie so much. You know, it just shows that it just sucks. Like
yeah.
being a cartoonist sucks, and that's what it shows. You know, so I enjoy it on that level. It's a good movie. You know?
It is, and you
Yeah,
know he just lost Eileen, which is was sad, but
yeah,
it just he's a fascinating guy, and it's one of those things where I never would have picked up a Zap, maybe you know when I was 18 years old, but now, especially when I'm down in the Bay Area and I find one, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna buy this. You know, I've
Oh,
it's just whenever I find anything that has his art on it, I'm like, yep, I'll take it.
no, one of the first things I saw, like, comic-wise, was back in the library. I saw, like, the cover for XYZ Comics when that character's squeezing the girl's nipple on the
Uh huh.
cover, and, like, um, again, I was just I couldn't believe everything was so grotesque, and that's funny coming from me now, but, like, it was just so grotesque and ugly, you know? It was interesting. I was, like, way too young to, like, kinda figure it out, though, but I was always kinda drawn to it.
He sees something. He sees just he whether he sees people in a different light or he just sees life in a completely different frame. It,
Yeah.
it's amazing that we get to live in the same time that he's created or has created.
Yeah, I mean, his brother Max used to be in San Francisco. I saw him all the time. He'd just be
Yeah.
on the street, like, begging, like chewing on the shoelace. You know what I mean?
Jesus. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but he used to be out all the time. I don't know where he is now.
Yeah, I don't know. John is the modern day liberatory Pettibon. Louis Lima. I don't know.
Well, you see, I'm a big fan of Raymond Pettibon.
Okay.
I'm a huge fan of Raymond Pettibon, and his work was a huge influence before I even knew who he was. Because it's just those record covers and everything were just so iconic and so different. Especially the one where the character paints himself into a corner. Like that's just like a brilliant piece of art. That's not even like a record cover. That's like a brilliant piece of art, you know. And Pettibone's a big deal for me, like a real big deal. And it's amazing. I'm glad he's huge and successful now. It's interesting that he's huge and successful because he hates all that stuff.
Hmm.
So I don't know how he deals with it, but it's interesting, and I'm glad he's making some money. You know, like Pettibone's one of the true greats of underground art, and it's truly underground art.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. Uh, Klaus, Daniel Klaus. Were you ever a fan?
I love Klaus. I love
Yeah,
Klaus's work. Yeah, I like the he's like the only like in the 8 Ball stuff when he was like rude and crude. You know, like
yeah.
I felt like he was the only successor to Crumb. You know, he's the only guy who was kind of smart like Crumb. You know.
He is.
Um, But even his later stuff, I like Velvet Glove, Cast in Iron. I think it's fantastic. You know, like that's probably like my favorite book of his. You know, his comic strip on going to art school is absolutely 100% correct, and I hate to say it, but it is. You know, I mean the art school confidential script. I mean that's art school. You know,
Yeah,
art school is that terrible.
that's what I
Um,
hear.
there's always like the guy drawing barbarians. There's always the guy drawing his girlfriend naked, and it's all that fucking bullshit. You know what I mean? And yeah, you
I
know,
love that. I love that. I
yeah.
mean,
But no, Klaus is fantastic. I think Klaus is a genius. You know.
it's obviously it's not a coincidence because it's alphabetical order, but when you go to the Fantagraphics store in Seattle, Klaus is right next to Crumb. So it's great. Like
Oh,
whenever I go
yeah.
in there, I'm just like, okay, let's see if there's any Crumb stuff, and I'll look at what Klaus. I mean, it's. Have you ever been there, the
I
Fantagraphics
didn't. I
store?
didn't even know there. I didn't know there was a store.
Well, next time
Yeah.
you're
So
in town, we'll take you over there, and
yeah.
I mean, it's. I go there usually once a month, and the manager there, he's been their manager for 30 years. Like he's exactly what you would think of if you were like, I wonder who runs the Fantagraphics store.
Do they still have Eros books? Are they still living off that stuff?
Uh, I don't. I mean, no, no, they really aren't. They
That's
really aren't.
amazing to me because that's how they survived all this time
Yeah,
off
there's.
pornography. That's why I always thought it was funny those guys were like so hell bent on comics as art. I'm like, you support your line off pornography,
Yeah, yeah.
because
There's
I remember
there's
I have an
some in the
old
corner, but that's about it.
yeah, I have an old comics journal in it where like Gary Groth is going after Todd like hardcore
Yeah,
because he hated all those guys, and he goes like, "What about all the hologram covers and all that stuff? You make money." And Todd's like, "You do porn,"
yeah,
you know. And in that same issue, like Gary Groth, like they get Alan Moore. They're like, what do you think of the current superhero or current state of superhero comics? This is the Image days, and obviously he wants Alan to go like it's all shit, right?
yeah. Except he
And
was
then
writing
Al,
some of it.
well, this is what Alan said. He goes, "It's just as bad as it's always been." He's like, "It's just like there's bigger pages and everything," but he's like, "It's still." He was like, "It's crap." Basically, he says it's crap before it's crap now.
Yeah, yeah,
Which is totally true. Because um, there was one point where I went through like a long time of reading nothing but superhero comics.
sure.
When I was doing a comic project and I was like, I'm gonna study the mainstream side of the art form, and it was like a lot of Garcia Lopez and everything, and the art's fantastic. But when you read enough of them, you feel your IQ lower. And I'm talking about like a couple months of reading nothing but superhero comics and just
Yeah.
like, man, the majority of stuff's just crap. And it doesn't matter what era it's from, you know what I mean? But there's a lot that's good. So I don't want people to think I'm being super negative, you know what I mean? It's
No,
just, it's an observation,
look,
like, I
there's
mean,
so
let
much.
me, like, for example, like there's a mainstream book I buy right now, or there's an artist, I always buy his books. And every time I buy his books, the art's fantastic. I feel like I wasted my time reading it.
Mm,
You know what I mean? And so it's not just because it's 70s, oh, it's bad. There's stuff I'm buying now that I'm just bad is the wrong term. I guess I'm just not interested in it. You know what I mean? So
right, because it's subjective, but there's. I went through that same phase. I read superhero shit. And then I was just like, I'm fucking done. And then my friend, when I was like 18, 19, he hands me Sandman, he hands me Sin City. He basically hands me Gaiman, Moore, and Miller, but
Yeah.
none of the superhero stuff. And for 10 years, that's all I read. I went down the rabbit hole of reading everything they ever did. And then I branched off and I read Garth Ennis, and I read, I started reading Fables, which was Bill Willingham, which is not a superhero book. Like I dove into the Vertigo, and there's so much. I like, right, you can't call it crap, but there's so much uninteresting stuff that has great art. What are
Yeah.
you
I
gonna,
mean, yeah, speaking of that Vertigo area, I love Ted McKeever. That's like a
Yeah.
huge influence on me. Like Metropole, Plastic Forks. A few years ago, he did Metaphor, which I thought was a
Huh.
fantastic book that no one read, no one talked about.
Yeah.
He's out of the industry and out of art. He's like, fuck you guys,
Really?
and left. Yeah.
Uh,
So, but like, Metaphor is one of the best modern comics I read in the past 10 years, and nobody read it. Nobody bought it. But that's,
I just wrote it down because I'm going to track it down because that sounds
yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Uh, he's yeah, like there's some of those Vertigo, some of that, not some of it, most of that Vertigo stuff is amazing. It's different, and it's what I needed at that time for almost a decade before I even dipped my toe back into any superhero stuff. Uh,
yeah. I read
and
bits and pieces. I wasn't like a big Vertigo person. Like, for instance, I never read Sandman.
oh
So,
man,
but I like Neil Gaiman. I just never read Sandman. So, getting back to Neil, you were talking about McKean doesn't do enough comics, but like I thought he's done like quite a bit of comics, especially with Neil. He
yeah,
did
it's just with Neil,
Violent Cases, which is great.
right?
Signal to Noise, which is great. Mr. Punch, which is great. He has Cages. He has Pictures That Tick. He has a lot of comics that are worthwhile. He did the erotic book, like some kind of erotic themed novel, like a few years back. He has a ton of stuff out,
Yeah,
and it's all like pretty solid, pretty good.
it feels like the Hellblazer book, and I still haven't read the other one, but it feels like that's just a little more. I don't know. Like if you read Violent Cases, you can't say that looks anything like that Hellblazer book,
No,
or the day I swap. Did he do it the day I swapped my dad for two
yeah,
goldfish? Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. What do you think? Do you have any? Oh well, somebody asked if you're a Barry Windsor Smith guy. Yes,
mm,
yes.
yeah.
And then Anti-Hero Comics, my buddy said I brought it up before, but are you familiar with Stephen Gammell? He did the story, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark children's books. I personally never read any of that or saw
Oh,
any of
those
that.
those were a big deal when I was a little kid.
Yeah.
So my sister had those, so I saw those all the time. I never remember the guy's name, but I know the book.
Well, now
So
we.
those were a huge deal, and I'm glad that they're still being published and kids still dig them.
Yeah.
They're great books, they're unique books, and artistically they're fantastic. So I think that's great. I'm
Cool.
always
Yeah.
happy to see that kind of success, like Shel Silverstein.
Oh yeah.
Any of that kind of stuff. I'm happy to see that it just keeps going. You know what I mean?
Well, it's funny that you said Shel Silverstein. The Zero Friends book was on my bookshelf right next to a Shel Silverstein book. It was next to Where the Sidewalk Ends, which is such
Yeah.
a classic book. But I mean, that's the thing. Like at a young age, even before we realize where we fall, in art, whether it's as a creator or somebody that loves it or just whatever, seeing that stuff at a young age is really, really helpful. Whether it's Shel Silverstein or if it's Dr. Seuss, Peanuts. I was never a big Peanuts reader, but my appreciation for Charles Schultz is one of the most influential human beings to ever put pen to paper. Like that man was a workhorse.
Oh yeah, one of the greatest artists. I'm not even saying cartoonist. One of
Yeah,
the greatest artists of the past century. Really,
yeah, for
his
sure.
influence is that big. His comic strip was that good.
Yeah, yeah. I
I
mean,
know.
like,
I know a lot of people like to say Calvin and Hobbes, which is brilliant, but there's no Calvin and Hobbes without Peanuts.
yeah, and Calvin and Hobbes, like if we're just looking at a base level of influence on the human spectrum, I feel like everybody's got something that they can be like has a Peanuts connection. Whether it's a
Yeah,
feeling, a lot of feelings. People will literally talk about their feelings in terms of Peanut cartoons. You
yeah,
know, it's something. It's like the Beatles. You know,
yeah.
it's just I like that you use that analogy because You know, when somebody says something about the Beatles and they're like, oh, they're not. I'm just like, you realize that music doesn't exist the way it exists without that band. It just doesn't.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know.
40 track studio recordings
Jeez.
that can't be replicated live.
Yeah. um,
But
I
at least they weren't the Rolling Stones, right?
that's
I
true.
like the Rolling Stones, but I know people shit on the Rolling Stones. So
I didn't like the Stones when I was younger, but I grew, to enjoy them. And like you could put on like there's 40 Rolling Stones songs that I could just be like, oh yeah, I know the lyrics to that. I know that. I know
yeah, yeah.
that. Vic chimed in with I'm a Heathcliff guy, especially the weird ones that make no sense. I was always a Garfield kid growing up. So I think well you're a cat guy, so I guess you could relate to loving things based on cats.
Yeah, I mean, I liked both. I mean, Heathcliff was fun. Garfield was fun.
Yeah.
You know, I don't, I don't think they have any. I don't think, I don't think they're like Calvin and Hobbes or like
No.
Peanuts, but they're fun strips. They're. I grew up reading the comic
Yeah.
strip page every Sunday. That was a big thing for me. Even
Yeah.
before I got into like regular comics. So
I think I did too because my parents got the Sunday paper. I would come down and I would want to see Garfield and the Far Side. Those were the two things I'd want
yeah,
to see first. Uh, oh,
and I love
oh,
Dick Tracy. Oh,
sorry.
don't ask me about Transformers. Anyway, I said I love Dick Tracy. So
All right.
Dave just
All
thinks
right.
it's funny that he can name like an old Transformer and I can still draw it.
Right,
Generally,
right.
yeah.
So speaking about Dick Tracy, any thoughts on Chester Gould?
Love Chester Gould, brilliant. There's not though that that I don't know if that's first generation, but that generation of comic strip artists are just unbelievable. Like the quality of the work they did.
Yeah.
Um, the what's his name? Alex Raymond, the crazies, the technical skill of Rip Kirby.
Mhm.
Like that strip is just an artistic marvel. And Chester Gould again, like they're Dick Tracy's a fantastic comic strip to read,
Yes,
like start to finish.
it is.
Like the characters are unique, the styling's unique. I mean, it's just great, and especially like, like I said, Milton Caniff. I can't say enough about Milton Caniff. The old spirit stuff is just ridiculous.
Kniff, I feel like I had this feeling, but I didn't. I don't know if I articulated it in my brain, but something about Kniff and Wally Wood kind of made me feel like maybe Wood was a big Kniff fan, but maybe I'm just seeing it in the signature.
Well,
Kniff sig-
Caniff's the Michael Golden, if you want to talk about it that way. So everything,
okay,
I mean, that could be argued because Caniff comes from Noel Sickles, but like I actually, and I understand that and I see that, but Caniff was kind of like stylistically, he influenced an entire generation. Like if you get like the old Alex Toth books, he writes like paragraphs about Caniff and Noel
huh?
Sickles. You know what I mean? Like, they're kind of the guy. Like, so Caniff kind of brought like he kind of got the language of like drawing with a brush down that a lot of artists were able to replicate. Terry and the Pirates and Steve Canyon were huge comic strips.
Yeah,
Big money makers. And he was just, I mean, just a great cartoonist. Fantastic stuff. Very imaginative. Great character designs.
and that
Even the guy after him, George Wonder, was fantastic. But George Wonder's stuff was really weird. But that's why I kind of liked it.
Kniff feels like one of the more prolific guys because I've seen these Steve Canyon books and it feels like it never ended. Like I've seen I went to an estate sale once and a person had a 6-foot bookshelf of just Kniff stuff.
I believe it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'd
So,
want that. I'd want that.
well, I'll keep my
Yeah.
eyes open for you.
Yeah.
Vic asked what was doing Halo like. Anything to share about
Halo
that?
Halo was weird. I didn't play the games. I didn't know anything about it when I drew it. I played the newer games later.
Yeah.
But I went through a binge where I watched all the cutscenes for the first 3 games.
Oh, cool.
It makes no sense. Like to me, Halo, I
Yeah.
think it's very interesting. I think conceptually it's interesting, but like the story didn't make sense. And then like I was like, maybe it's just me, but I didn't play the game, so there's a certain
Right.
perspective I'm lacking as well. But it was interesting when I saw Neil Blomkamp talk about why Halo didn't work out for him. He kind of said something along the lines of like, I couldn't get things to work, and I kind of knew what he was saying. Like, they're like these ideas that don't seem to like come together? I don't know, but like I said, I didn't play the game. I don't have an in-depth knowledge. You know what I mean?
The
So
story,
like I'm as an outsider looking in. So like
yeah,
most people who are outsiders looking in with any story they're looking at, it kind of doesn't make sense with them unless it's
yeah,
very simple. You know what I mean? So I kind of say that, but I'm coming from a point of view of someone who's ignorant of Halo, really, you know. But I played Halo 5. I played Halo, um, the one that's out now.
yeah.
Um, I actually worked on a lot of the commercials. I worked on the storyboard, the commercials for Halo 3, Halo ODST, Halo
Hmm.
something. Like I worked on several Halo commercials actually, but I still
Ah,
didn't know anything about it. So
well, I as somebody that played the first 3 games pretty religiously multiple times, the story's like you said, the overall thing is kind of smart, but yeah, it's just very choppy the storytelling. So
yeah, it would go from like Master Chief and like this really like classic kind of like like Robert Heinlein kind of storyline, and then it had like these mystical aspects of it. It just didn't jive. It had like all these different genres that to me just weren't going together. But like I
yeah,
said, it was like to me the Master Chief thing was very separate from what they were doing with the Halo stuff, like the actual Halo rings, and
yeah,
it
the
was like
Arbiter.
different. Yeah, the Arbiter and all that. But like I said, I'm coming from someone who didn't experience the stories in the games, and I'm sure that's a pretty different experience.
Yeah.
So.
Did you work on the Halo? The question is, did you work on the Halo 3 Believe commercial?
Yeah, I worked
Yeah,
on the so I work on the conceptual side of those. So basically, an advertising agency has an idea to pitch,
yeah.
and that one I visualize them in storyboards. So I did maybe like 20 color storyboards for that,
Oh
and they
wow.
pitch it to Microsoft, and then that was actually made. So a lot of stuff doesn't get made, but the Halo stuff I'll make like a year before the game comes out, and then the commercials actually go into testing usually.
Hmm.
So there's like a long process, but that commercial is pretty much what I drew.
Okay.
It's just it's a great commercial. I mean, the Halo commercials were really good commercials.
Yeah, I remember loving them. I was smoking probably as much weed as I ever had in my life in that time. So
Yeah,
some of it is foggy, but I played so much of that game and those that I remember that how effective the commercial was. That one specifically, the Believe
yeah.
one.
So they're
Yeah.
fun to work on. Yeah.
Yeah. um, well, let's go through this because I thought this would be fun. Are you cool to be on for a little while?
Yeah,
Little,
sure.
cool, cool.
Yeah.
You talked about Gil Kane
Mhm.
being one of your favorites or an artist that you love, and
Yeah.
I thought it would be fun to flip through. What I like to do every once in a while is pull out a really expensive or a somewhat expensive book and flip through it. And this is Amazing Spider-Man 101, the first appearance of Morbius. And you know what that means, John? It's Morbid time.
Yeah. I mean that comic isn't worthless yet.
Well, it did shoot down a little a lot, but I mean,
Yeah.
like Morbius is a first of all, this cover to me is one of the fucking greatest Spider-Man covers because he is backhand slapping six-armed Spider-Man down the stairs. Like,
Yeah.
how are you going to introduce a character? Have a beat the shit out of Spider-Man on the
Yeah.
cover. But it's a Roy Thomas and Gil Kane and then Frank Giacoia inking
Mm.
Gil Kane. Was Frank one of his main inkers? Do you know? Or I'm not super knowledgeable on Gil
He
Kane.
did a lot of Marvel stuff during the period. The thing about Gil's stuff is Gil's stuff always came through no matter who the inker was,
Yeah,
Like just structurally you could always tell that was Gil's stuff. So
yeah,
it was
yeah.
it was interesting. Like a lot of those covers, it's very different from what Gil would have done, like
Hmm.
inking wise, But no, it's very cool stuff.
Yeah, and I like his Spider-Man. His Spider-Man to me is a classic Spider-Man. Just
Yeah.
looks pretty tight. Looks he looks. I mean, the neck on Spider-Man there is about 4 inches longer than a human neck should be, but that's okay. That's
Well,
okay.
that's what's great about Gil Kane's stuff,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. He's like a spider though. He's gangly.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we were talking before we went live, and I was flipping through some of the stuff that Kane had done that I was not aware of, and being the co-creator of Green Lantern and having such a he's solidified his legacy just in the DC stuff that he helped create. It's pretty impressive. But my favorite thing about this book is the cover gets mimicked on a splash page, and well, I think we can get through all these ads. There it is. So we get, you know, you get the cover of him, but then you get the shot of him falling, and it's just, I don't know. I like this book specifically for this splash page.
That's a great page. I mean, it's
Yeah.
always those Gil Kane hands, you know.
Yeah, he does draw some great hands. So,
Yeah.
you know, I've gotta get some more Gil Kane in my life. I mean, it's funny because it's not on this book, but at least later in his Marvel tenure, you know, his signature is prevalent on every cover, and it's a pretty cool signature. I don't know if you kind of know what it looks like.
Yeah.
And I always appreciated that. You know, like just looking at guys and their art signatures, because I guess, you know, it's going to be different from their day-to-day signature. And I always appreciated that. Obviously, we could, you know, cite Todd, which is an easy one to cite, but is that something that like ever stuck out to you, or it sticks out to you? Is just, you know, like, I like your art signature, and Dave's and Alex's is awesome too, but is that something that like ever really stuck in your brain, like seeing some of these signatures on the covers or anything like that?
When you're a little kid, like,
Yeah,
as an
that's what
adult.
I mean.
Yeah, I mean, Todd's one on the scroll was, I mean, it's funny. I mean, the one that was always, and I found this out like a few years ago, the Walt Simonson one's supposed to be a dinosaur.
It's a
I didn't
dinosaur.
realize
Yeah.
that. Yeah, so that's great. You know what I mean? So,
I feel like that's something that's lost. It's completely lost. It just doesn't exist anymore.
I don't know. I mean, like I said, it's not something I've really considered. So
Yeah.
I mean, a signature as sloppy as it is, it's still a signature, you know.
Right.
So my signature is slop, and like I was actually encouraged to keep doing that by one of my teachers, because she goes, "That expresses what you're trying to express," which is true because I don't care, you know. So it was interesting. My teacher, Cameron Lawson, who died a few years ago. She's the only person who believed in my art at that time. And,
well, that's,
you know,
that's all you need, right? Is that, you know, like one person believing in you can shoot you a long way.
well, yeah, because I got a lot of resistance from a lot of other people. So it was nice to have that, because I was doing some at the time I was doing something really odd. And like it's nice to have that kind of encouragement, you know, because otherwise you're onto an island of yourself, and it's kind of hard to take that first leap when everybody's kind of like, you're wrong. You know what I mean? So I needed someone like her. So like she's very important to like how I became an artist, you know, the artist that I am today.
Well, I mean, support is a huge thing, and just to get it from one person, in my eyes, is, you know, worth its weight in gold.
Yeah.
You know, because I can say in my life, you know, just in my last year and a half of my life, this endeavor, which I hope to keep going for a long time, and you know, it's been supported by a bunch of people that have been really helpful, and like, I don't know if I could have gone on without that kind of support, you know. And just, you know, a little encouragement here and there really helps. There's a name that I was informed is a very huge influence on you, and maybe you could say yes or no, but Sergio Topi?
Not really. No.
Not really. All right.
No. Topi was something I came across later in college.
Okay.
And I like to, don't get me wrong, I like Topi a lot. I have his books, but he wasn't an influence. He came like way later. Like that was like, so like my influences are like the early turn of the century pen and ink artists, like especially Joseph Clement Cole and Heinrich Clay. Like that's where my style, in terms of the pen and ink, the cross hatching, that's where it actually comes from.
Okay.
You know, and Henry C. Pitts is pen and ink books. This is all. So, yeah, I mean, Topi is way later. So like even like Barry Smith's even Barry Smith, or not Barry Smith, Bernie Wrightson's Frankenstein. You know, by the time I came across that, I mean, it's beautifully drawn, but that was not impressive or shocking to me because I've seen that style before.
Right.
I mean, I've seen Franklin Booth's work, and Franklin Booth is just, and this is not a secret. I mean, Wrightson will admit that, but like he was trying to do Booth, you know, and then Booth is just on another planet. You know what I mean? So it's not that it wasn't good, but it's like by that point I've seen all that stuff already. So like
Yeah.
Frankenstein didn't really like blow me away because all those styles were done in like 1910, 1920. So
But not in the
um,
comic book medium. That's I
yeah,
guess
but
that
it's still an illustration medium. That doesn't
yeah.
really make a difference. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, that's true.
but um, but no, so like that's where my main influence, especially Joseph Clement Cole. That's a big one. Joseph Clement Cole and Heinrich Clay. Those are the two like big ones. I mean, there's plenty of pen and ink artists, but
Mhm.
those are the main guys where their skill is just unmatched. You know.
All right. Well, I struck out like 4 times with the influences, so I'll just go fuck myself. But
But I like Topi a lot. I like Topi's work a
yeah,
lot, so
I
that's
didn't
where
know
that's
who he
from.
was until Dave
Yeah.
told me, and I looked it up, and I was like, oh yeah. And then we started talking about Bernie. I did want to flip through this because I thought you might be
I like
interested.
I like Alberto Breccia. That's someone
Breccia.
who he like I found out about him later, but his stuff is very just I mean, I think Argentine comic artist, and his stuff's
Okay.
finally available in English. You should check that out.
Who's man? I can't. He was a Brazilian artist who did some work. I can't remember his name on Spirits of Vengeance, Terror Inc. I can't remember the dude's name, but he passed away young. There's I don't know a ton of South and Central American
Or are
artists.
you talking about the guy that did Cyber Six?
Maybe. Do you, if you said his name, I would know it. But
I don't know his name off the top of my head, but that's someone who died young that was a South American artist.
yeah, I
And
think
I
that's
know he did some Marvel and DC stuff, or
yeah,
one of them.
yeah.
He
He
did
was
DC stuff, I know that for sure.
yeah. It's probably who I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Can't remember the name, but I thought this would be fun to see. I don't know if you've ever seen this portfolio, Strength of Man.
No, I
Um,
haven't actually.
it's a Shanes and Shanes portfolio back Blackthorn Publishing back in '87, and like I picked it up because well you look at the names on here, I don't know all of them.
Yeah.
I'm not well versed in all of them, but I knew Eisner and Hampton and Jeff Jones and Mobius and Sankiewicz and Sears and Pratt and Nolan, but it was a great way for me to get some really cool prints that are all signed, and
Hmm.
half of these dudes are dead.
Really?
Yeah, well, look,
Yeah.
Jeff Jones, Eisner are both passed. Mobius
Yeah.
passed. So, like, the biggest names in here are no longer with us.
Yeah.
Oh, I know Carlos Pacio just. Oh no, we weren't talking about Pacio,
Yeah.
but he did just pass away. But yeah, this is such. I mean, it's all about the strength of man. So it's human form, but some beautiful stuff in here. Like Jones is not somebody I was exposed to, at a young age. So, I knew Smith and Jones was an amazing artist too.
Jones is absolutely brilliant. Can't
Yeah,
emphasize that enough.
yeah.
His painting and his pen and ink and his comic stuff, the ideal comic strip. Like Jones is just a master draftsman,
Hmm.
and it's just his level of draftsmanship's just out of this. Most people will never draw that good.
Yeah.
That's how good his draftsmanship is.
Something to be said. It was him and Smith, and who was the third? Wasn't
Oh,
it
you're talking about
three?
the studios,
Yeah, the studio.
Kaluta.
It was Kaluta,
It was Kaluta and
and then Bernie.
yeah, that was Bernie. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
Wrightston. Yeah.
And this one's Bart Sears and Rick Bryant. Bryant, I'm not familiar with, but Bart Sears, I am. Obviously, I grew
Yeah,
up reading Wizard, so you know they shoved them in our faces whether we wanted it or
yeah.
not. Chris Miller, this is a pretty cool piece, but not familiar with him. And then you get to Scott Hampton, who I have a friend
Yeah.
who was telling me about Scott Hampton when I was like, I don't even know, like he's brilliant too. He, I put him with Pratt and Muth, those guys are kind of synonymous with each other.
He has so many different styles. I've never seen an artist with so many styles like Scott Hampton.
Yeah. Is he still working at all? Like, is he still putting anything out?
I don't know. I mean, his posts. I come across his posts on Facebook. So he's still doing stuff, but I don't know what for.
I mean, I is there anything you want to say about Mobius? Because I mean, Mobius.
Everybody owes a portion of their check to Mobius. I mean,
Seriously.
it's pretty simple, man. Whatever Marvel movie, whatever science fiction movie, whatever Blade Runner ripoff movie, everybody owes a little bit to Mobius's estate.
I feel like
You know,
what's his name? William Gibson needs the same check that you cut Mobius, you got to cut for science fiction movies. You got to cut William Gibson in.
that's kind of true in a way. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah.
Brian Murray. Are you familiar with him at all?
Who's it?
Brian Murray.
No.
Yeah, me neither. Let's see. And then we got Pratt. And
Yeah.
Pratt's something else. I mean, you know, I, I don't know enough about him, but when I see him, like he's, I know who I'm looking at without knowing, the name that's on there.
Yeah, just again, unbelievable draftsman, highly experimental, which I always respect him for, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, the kid in me would not like this. The 15-year-old, but the 43-year-old
Yeah.
totally digs it. Kevin Nolan, I think Kevin Nolan's a very underrated force when it comes to at least the comic medium.
I think he is with collectors. Pros unanimously like sing the praises of Kevin Nolan. But
Yeah.
yeah, like in the public space, he never really kind of got any steam, you know?
No, and he worked on so many Batman books too. You would think
Yeah.
that would, but I appreciate him because he's one of those people I could see I could be flipping through a box of Batman and be like, oh, that's Nolan. That like he's can very very much spot him in there. Rick Bryan and Mark Beecham.
Yeah.
Matt Beecham
Yeah.
did those tattoos, but that's my friend Matt Beecham.
Okay. Yeah, I met Mark a long time ago. He was part of that continuity comics crew.
Yeah. Yeah, he's somebody I probably should be more familiar with. Um, I mean, it's Sienkiewicz. Just
That's an
it's
interesting
unbelievable.
case.
Yeah, it's so weird.
Yeah.
I love him. He's on my short list and my short list of people to get on this channel at some point.
Yeah.
But
One day.
yeah, one day exactly. And then there's Will Eisner, which
Mm.
okay, so there's this thing about Will Eisner that I knew his name, but I always thought, and I guess this was done purposefully, but I always thought he was associated with Disney because of the I in his
Oh.
signature.
Yeah, I
It's
don't
the
know.
same thing, but he's loosely connected to the family.
Is he really?
Yeah, I did some research on it, and there's some connection. I forget what it is specifically, but there is some connection between Eisner and the company and Disney.
Okay, I've actually never heard that. He's never
I
discussed it. So
I think
that's
it's
interesting.
maybe he's related to Michael Eisner. I'll have to research that and
Okay.
get back to you personally, but I did the research once. So
Okay.
if somebody wants to do it while we're here. And then there's Rick Bryant
Nice piece.
closing out. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. But this was just something I picked up along the way that I don't know if you know, I mean, when we met, I was still working for that company that did the events and I worked in the
Yeah.
memorabilia industry. So to me, like just having some autographs from some of these creators that are, no longer on this planet is part of my collecting style.
Yeah. I mean, my collecting days are long behind me, so I just
Yeah.
like buy stuff for content and like just for reading.
Right.
But I mean, obviously, I enjoy it if I get a signature or something like that. But
Do you have any?
I
Do you ever? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
oh, never mind. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask you if you have ever collected any original art.
Yeah, I did for a short while, and I have some stuff, but not a whole lot.
Yeah.
It was too expensive by the time I was involved. I have one Sienkiewicz New Mutants page I bought for $150 a long time ago.
Wow.
My page is actually in the artist edition,
Oh,
the New
sick.
Mutants artist edition. But yeah, not much. Very shortly I tried, and then I just quit because I just wasn't comfortable with spending that kind of money.
Yeah.
I'm just not a collector. I'm fine. I'm actually fine with printed books
Yeah.
and even bad quality printed books that I can get for like 50 cents or $1. Like I'm fine with just enjoying the content. That other aspects are bonuses, but I really don't need them,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny for me. I rather read the hardcovers. I'd rather read the nice edition that I can just pull up on my couch and sit there and read it. But then I come in contact with so many comics now. I'm just like, oh, I can just sit here and read this book. That's I'll probably sell, but at least I get to read it. Like we just went through the Amazing Spider-Man 101.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
mean, in terms of pure enjoyment, like if I would just want to chill and not like
Yeah.
have to think about anything, I prefer the manga format.
Okay.
It's like more comfortable for me, like just kind of throw around and read and have some fun with. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I mean that's the thing about this medium that I love is that we all have. You could get 15 people in a room, and we could all have 15 different ways that we like to consume comics, but it feels a little bit more personal than movies, than music. Well, maybe not music, but movies and regular books. I don't know. There's just something about it that we get into this space and we all start talking about it. We all find our different ways of consuming it or what we really like about it. And it just the more I dive into it in the format that we're doing now, the more of an appreciation that I have than the entire 43 years before this, or 42 years before this.
yeah, I mean, it's like anything else. You know what I mean? I don't think comics offers the unique personal experience that you can't get from movies or anything like that. You know what I mean? I think it's all there. Like if there's something could be really shitty, but if it connects to you, it's still art.
Yeah,
It could be like
yeah,
the worst like Vinegar Syndrome movie ever. But like if it speaks to you, it speaks to you. You know
that's
what I
true.
mean? So
That's true.
I think everything's capable of doing that. It's just up to the person, really.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess yeah, that's true. I think yeah, movies can provide the same escape, and music provides a therapeutic thing for me. So I guess you're right. It's depending on the person, depending on what it is.
Yeah.
So I just figure we could, if there's anything you have that you'd love to talk about Sienkiewicz, I love hearing people talk about Sienkiewicz because maybe it's unique, maybe I'm looking at one, but there's something about his artwork that like two people can look at it and just like have two completely different things to say, and I know that could be said about anything in art, like you just said, but there's something about his art. I don't know.
I think people have to realize that Bill had a different point of view because he was taking influences from outside of comics.
Yeah.
Because even today, everybody's taking influence from the same stuff. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Whether it's comics or Pixar movie or Kim Jong-gi or whatever the hell it is,
right.
it's all in that same little bubble of like whatever this is called, comics, whatever it is.
Uh-huh.
But he was going towards like illustration, fine art, and he was like expanding his knowledge. And that's why he was able to bring something unique and experimental to the table. There's especially like some of the earlier pieces in this portfolio. There's a lot of Mark English and Bernie Fuchs in it, especially Mark English. And that's why he was able to bring like a different point of view to the medium. You know what I mean? He wasn't
Mhm.
looking at comics.
No,
He
no.
wasn't he wasn't worried about what George Perez was drawing on Wonder Woman.
Right.
And that was like that kind of informed him in a way that other guys were not being informed.
Yeah. Is there uh is there anything that like anybody that you want to talk about that maybe we didn't touch on, or somebody that I might, I don't, some of these guys you're naming I don't know, and I love that because there's
Well,
only one way to learn, you
well, to
know.
be annoying, then I'm going to bring up Paul Pope.
Oh, I was
um,
gonna just mention Paul Pope, so let's
because
talk about Paul Pope.
Paul Pope, to me, for a very long time, was the total package. He was the
Mhm.
writer, artist, and everything just came together. Like these unique projects, like especially Escapo is my favorite, 100%.
Mhm.
Like there were small little stories, like small little like romance stories in these weird settings, and Paul would just draw them himself and write them, and they're very profound and they're drawn well, and the storytelling was well. Like everything he did was good.
Yeah.
Everything was like top notch. And Paul, like for the early 2000s and mid 2000s, was the best to me, the best guy working in the industry. Period. You know what I mean? He hasn't put out anything for a real long time. I don't know why
No.
that is, but I wish he would come back and put something out because he's a unique voice that I think the industry needs. And I finally got to meet him, said hi, said I appreciate his work. Didn't have much of a conversation with him, but it was nice. But it's like I knew of him like in the very early days of like the late '90s. Like I have all of majority of those original books, and like it would be like Ape when it was in like Alternative Press Expo in San Jose, and he had his crew. He had that one Asian dude that was a designer on a lot of the books at that time that was always
Uh-huh.
with him. and they would yell at you to come at their table. They would like yell at you to keep coming. I'm like, who the hell is this guy, man? And you like go over there. This is like 97, like somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And you go over there. I can't remember if I bought one of the books. I can't remember if I bought it from him or not, but they would yell at you to come over there. You go over there, you look at the books, and it was kind of nervy, it was kind of obnoxious, but it kind of worked, like his his diatribes in his early books were like extremely intelligent, extremely well thought out, and very just very interesting. Like it showed like an in-depth knowledge of comics, but at the same time very arrogant too. Like it was like very strange, but everything about Pope that he did at that time was just brilliant, and one of my absolute favorite creators ever. And at that time, I think the best guy in the business.
And he did his own stuff, and he worked at DC. I mean, he did Batman Year 100?
Yeah,
Yeah. It's
yeah.
interesting, but it's interesting when you see somebody that is more of the indie, self-published type scene just pop over to one of the major two and do something, and everybody's like, "Oh wow, this is really good," you know?
Yeah, I mean, it was just like really just out there and really
Yeah.
different. Like I remember when One Trick Ripoff came out, you know what I mean? Because I had the Comic Journal interviews with him. I think it was in the back of the Barry Windsor Smith one. That's why I bought it.
Uh-huh.
And they're just like really wild interviews. Like when I read them at the time, I remember like it'd be like a girl with her legs spread, and there'd be like a peach in front of her vagina, and that was a drawing. I was just like, wow, this is really provocative, kind of interesting stuff. He's
Yeah.
taking it somewhere that nobody else is kind of taking it. And if that's the common theme for tonight, that's what always kind of interests me, stuff like that. So
I like that. I
yeah,
like
but
that.
Escapo, definitely for sure get Escapo. It's a shame that all of his reprints are he's coloring everything because the stuff's better in black and white.
Okay.
But the black and white stuff I don't think you can really get anymore. So but
Well,
Escapo, I highly recommend. 100% from DC is easy to find. 100% is great.
yeah. Did
Yeah.
they do a solo book of him when DC did those solo series? I can't remember. I feel
That
like
was
they did.
that was good.
Yeah.
That solo series was good. The one that was really brilliant was the Darwin Cook.
Darwin Cook.
That one
Yep.
was really good.
Yep.
The Sienkiewicz one was really well. Wait, did Sienkiewicz? No,
No,
he
I don't.
didn't. No, he didn't. I'm thinking of something else. But like,
Yeah.
yeah, the Pope one was really good. I love that solo series. Mark Chiarello did some really interesting series. Like he did Wednesday Comics. I enjoyed all the risks he took. I'm sure every one of his projects lost money, but I thought he always did interesting projects.
Well, I like that theme though. Experimental, weird. There's a lot of things that I approach in the art I consume that falls into that. It's just sometimes I don't talk about it. Like I look at a
Yeah.
lot of the people that we talked about tonight, and I'll always relate almost everything to music at some point. But I look at a lot of the stuff that we talked about as like the Mars Volta. I don't know if you ever listened to the Mars Volta,
I
but
did. I did some of it. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of it's just all over the place. It changed. The tempo is changing. The time signatures are all over the place, and I think we all need to consume things that have that to shake up and get us away from the norm, because it gets boring in the norm. It really
Yeah,
does.
but I mean, it's a personal choice. I mean,
Yeah,
what's weird and bizarre to you might not be weird and bizarre to me, and what's weird and bizarre to me is not weird and bizarre to so and so over there. You know what I mean?
right.
So I think it all depends. You know what I mean? I mean, like I said, inspiration can come from anywhere.
Mhm.
It's. I mean, look at my style now. Like I'm like buying comics off the rack at Thrifties. You know what I mean? So like, all the weirdo stuff I know about, I had to find. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So it really comes down to what you're looking for. You know what
of
I
course.
mean? There's even stuff that like I knew as a kid I talk about, and nobody knows what I'm talking about, like events that would have happened in school and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
And it's to the point where I was like, am I making this up? Because it's like some bizarre stuff. But then somebody will confirm it for me. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
You know
Or
what I mean? So
yeah.
like it all depends on what you're looking for and what you're observing, really. You know what I mean? So teach their own, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It doesn't have to be Mars Volta, it could be black metal, it could be
It's true. It's
Burzum
true.
lining his amp through like a shitty boombox to make the vocals sucky. You know what I mean? Like it you know, it could be anything, you know,
Yeah,
like, um, yeah, I mean, I have a Jimi Hendrix CD that I think came off the Sienkiewicz graphic novel where he's just doing demos in his room and you hear the phone ringing in the background. You know what I
that's
mean? It's
amazing.
like, you know, it's anything. You know, don't let
Yeah,
anybody dictate, you know, like the shittiest Marvel movie that's out right now could be a big inspiration for the most brilliant whacked out artist, you know what I mean?
yeah,
So,
yeah. We do find. I
yeah.
mean, I find inspiration in just listening to people talk about the things they love. Like that, it truly inspires me. Like listening to you talk about this stuff will inspire me to like next time I run across one of these names that you mentioned, I'll pick it up and I'll read it. You know,
Yeah.
it's that's just how my brain works. Is like I like just hearing people talk about the things that inspire them because it inspires me to just keep talking about the shit that I love. You know, there's people that watch this entire interview, this talk that me and you are having. I
Is
don't
there?
know why. Yeah,
Is
there's
anybody
people in
there?
it.
I don't see a number here, so I don't know. Like,
I there's 10
okay,
currently
cool.
10 people in here,
Yeah.
but I guess maybe if you is there anything else you want to talk about in the comic medium or just in comics in general? You know,
Um,
because if not, I thought that would be a good place to kind of
yeah, I think we're on long enough. Like,
yeah,
I can actually go on forever with this kind of
yes,
thing.
yeah.
But yeah, no, this is good.
Well, I do want to thank you for this. I wanted to just show this off because
Oh,
it's the one piece that we traded for, and you know, I love me some Venom. So
yeah.
guys, if you want to see the meanest Venom you've ever seen, it's right here. It's right here.
Maybe one day he'll be good in the movie. One day.
Yeah, I wouldn't get my hopes up on that, but
I'm still hoping. You want to hear something bizarre?
yeah.
Because generally I don't care about mainstream movies and like Spider-Man or like Marvel movies and all that. I'm hoping Avatar 2 is good.
Me too.
Believe it or
Me
not,
too.
because like I like James Cameron so much. I want him to have that last hurrah.
Yeah.
You know, I want him to have that last great movie because like Barry Smith's Monster was a
Holy
brilliant comic book.
shit!
And
It
it
was.
actually made me, I'll admit this, it made me kind of emotional that the old man was able to like just end on just a high note, you know, and it really made me happy that he was able to do it. So I'm hoping the
Yeah.
same thing for Cameron because
Um.
Cameron has done some great stuff. And I want him to have that just master thesis, like this is the end, and just do that thing. You know what I mean? So
Well, I'll
I'm
say,
rooting for Avatar.
yeah.
I hated the first movie, but I'm
Did you
rooting for it.
did you hate did you hate the experience or did you hate the plain story?
No, honestly, no, the story.
Yeah.
Honestly, the experience was interesting. I'm sure it's better now.
Yeah.
I was more impressed by the technical aspects of it.
Sure.
The digital, the 3D stuff, and I remember specifically the muscle deformation of like belly fat and stuff like that was pretty incredible for the time.
Yeah.
So like it wasn't horrible, but like the story was extremely weak.
Yeah.
The characters are extremely stupid. Um, the Navis look stupid, you know. But like, I'm hoping he has that great finale. You
Well,
know,
he is making like 6 more of them, so,
I just need one. I just need one great
I
one.
yeah, yeah,
I don't care. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. But I will say
So
this, I I remember leaving that movie theater, seeing it in the true IMAX 3D in Manhattan, and leaving that movie theater and say, "I don't think I'll ever have another movie experience quite like this." Like, it was I my brain said to me, like, I was in that movie. Like, I was
okay.
watching that movie in that movie, and that's all I want for this one is I want to be underwater with the Navi swimming around with these giant megalodon looking things. Like, because at the end of the day, like, for me, there's 2 reasons to go to the movies. There's to see a brilliant piece of film, or there's the life doesn't exist for the next 2.5, 3 hours. I'm in this.
Yeah.
And that's the separation of the 2 kinds of movies for me. So I'm hoping that the Avatar is okay. I'm going over there to Pandora. I'm gonna go swim around. See you later for 3 hours. You
Yeah.
know,
I mean, it's a big deal to me because like he was. I mean, forget about the subject matter of the movies. Like
yeah,
on a technical side of putting together genre films, Aliens is, I mean, on a technical storytelling, camera shots, like Aliens is like almost, I mean, as close to flawless as you can get. Terminator 2 as well. Like it's
Yeah,
just they're put together with such precision and just intent that is almost non-existent right now. It's, he was on par with Spielberg, if
yeah,
not better. I mean, um, and we live in an era where everybody's trying to be those guys, especially Spielberg, but they're not even close on a technical level. Because what those guys did is hard. Like it's extremely difficult what those guys did. And like Raiders of the Lost Ark, I think is as close to perfect of a genre film as you can get. Yeah, so that's why I'm hoping, because like he's just I it's just he's a great filmmaker for that style of film, and I would like to
sure.
see him end on a high note. So that's all it is.
Somebody
You know.
said to me, and I think you'll like this, or somebody said to me, I read a couple weeks ago that they were trying to insult Avatar 2, the trailer, by
Mm.
saying it looks like the inside of a heavy metal magazine just done by James Cameron. I'm like, yeah, fuck, I'll take that.
Yeah. Except without all the pornography and
Right,
druggies.
right. But
Yeah.
I'm excited for that. But all
Yeah.
right, well, I think that's a great place to end. I really enjoyed this, and you schooled me on some things. I struck out a bunch, and I love that because I love being wrong, and especially being wrong with somebody that is not going to get mad at me for being wrong. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
No, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. Thanks
good.
to the people that stuck around. This was a long one, but
Yeah,
hopefully you
yeah.
guys got something out of it.
I enjoyed it. I hopefully everybody else
Yeah.
enjoyed it. But I threw your links down below, so your website
Okay.
and your Instagram. Those are probably the two main places to find you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And then, yeah, if anybody's going to listen to any recommendation, get 100% by Paul Pope. That should be easy to find on
there we
Amazon.
go.
So try that out.
All right.
All right,
All
cool.
right. Well, everybody, I'll be not doing my Wednesday sale, but be live on Thursday or Friday right here on YouTube for Thursday or Friday West Coast Wednesday redo. But John, you stick around. We'll talk when we're off, but everybody have a great weekend, a great week of whatever it is, but keep digging. All right, everybody, keep
All right.
digging.
Thanks, guys.
All right. I'm going to close this out. Just give me 1 sec. All right, bye everybody.
West Coast Avengers.